Hey everyone, tonight we're going to drift back way back to a time of ochre dust and golden gods to the banks of the River Nile. Picture yourself not as a pharaoh or a high priest, but as someone far more essential and far more quiet. We're going to follow the life of an ancient Egyptian scribe from the moment that path first seems possible all the way to its gentle, papery end. You'll feel the coarse tunic on your skin, the grit of the desert between your toes, and the slow creeping ambition that pulls you toward a life of letters. Now, for the reality check, if you were actually dropped into this world, the odds are you wouldn't be chosen for this life. You'd most likely be hauling mud bricks until your back gave out, wondering what a written word even looked like. You probably won't survive this, at least not as the person you are now. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. For those of you tuning in from around the globe, go ahead and post your city and what time it is for you. It's always a quiet thrill to see where you're all listening from. For my podcast listeners, a follow and a 5-star rating helps this channel find more people like you who enjoy these slow drifts into the past. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is mud. It's the first thing you feel when you wake the cool, damp earth beneath your sleeping mat. It's the last thing you taste at night, a fine dust that coats your teeth and settles in the back of your throat, a souvenir from the fields. You are perhaps 9 years old, maybe 10. Age is a fuzzy concept marked more by the height of the barley than by any formal count of years. Your name is, well, let's just say it's a good strong name, one that means the god Thoth is satisfied or something equally optimistic. But nobody really uses it. To most, you are simply a son of a farmer, another pair of hands destined to serve the endless cyclical demands of the river. The sun is already a blistering promise on the eastern horizon. You pull on a simple linen loincloth, your only garment, and follow the silent shape of your father out of the small mud brick house you share with your mother, your sisters, and a goat that has an unnerving habit of staring. There is no breakfast as you would know it. You chew on a handful of dried dates, their sticky sweetness, a brief moment of pleasure before the day's bitterness begins. You walk barefoot. The path is already warm, and you know that in a few hours it will be a bed of embers, scorching the soles of your feet until they are as tough and cracked as old leather. This is your life. This is the script written for you from the moment you were born. You arrive at the fields, a vast patchwork of green and brown, stretching out to the hazy edges of the desert. Your father is a tenant farmer, which is a nice way of saying he works land owned by a temple or a distant wealthy noble in Thebes. A significant portion of everything you grow, the barley for bread, the emmer wheat for beer, the flax for linen, doesn't belong to you. It will be taken, measured, and hauled away as taxes. That is the fundamental truth of your existence, the sweat from your father's brow, and soon your own waters the gardens of the great. This is the mainstream, undeniable fact of ancient Egypt. For every pyramid, for every golden mask, there were a million anonymous lives spent in toil, an entire civilization built on the aching backs of farmers. Your job today is simple, and it's the same as yesterday's. You take a heavy wooden yoke across your narrow shoulders, a clay pot hanging from each end. You trudge to the irrigation canal, dip the pots until they are brimming with murky, life-giving water, and then haul them to the thirsty rows of young vegetables. The yoke digs into your neck. The water sloshes down your legs, mixing with the dust to form a gritty paste. You do this again and again and again. The sun climbs. The heat becomes a physical weight pressing down, shimmering above the soil. Your father is nearby, his back already bent into the familiar curve of labor, his face a mask of concentration as he breaks up clods of earth with a heavy hoe. He doesn't speak. There is nothing to say. Around you, life and death are casual neighbors. You see men working in the canals, knee-deep in the same water that carries the parasites that will one day bloat their bellies and drain their strength, a nasty little affliction we now call schistosomiasis. It's a quirky, grim tidbit of the past that this life-giving river was also a source of chronic, debilitating disease for those who worked it most closely. Nobody knew why, only that the gods were sometimes cruel. You just know that Uncle Marin coughs blood and that his stomach is swollen like a melon. You try not to think about it. But today, something is different. A figure is approaching, walking along the raised path that borders the field. He doesn't trudge, he glides. He isn't coated in dust. His white linen kilt is immaculate pristine against the brown landscape. He carries no yoke, no hoe. He carries a wooden pallet under one arm, a roll of something pale and precious in his hand, and he is followed by two other men. One of them, the overseer of your sector, is pointing and talking, his gestures full of frantic respect. The man in white just nods, his expression calm, detached. He is a scribe. You've seen them before, of course, at the harvest, when they sit in the shade of a canopy tallying the grain as it's measured. They are like beings from another world. They don't sweat. Their hands are clean, the nails unstained by soil. They are the living embodiment of a life you cannot fathom, a life without mud and endless aching thirst. As the scribe passes, his gaze sweeps over the field, and for a fleeting second it meets yours. There is no recognition, no pity, just a blank assessment. You are a number to him, a factor in a calculation of labor and yield, a unit. But in that glance, a seed of an idea, a wild, impossible dream is planted in your mind. What if the mud wasn't your destiny? Historians still argue whether the dream of social mobility was a genuine possibility for a farmer's son or merely a comforting fiction. Was the path to becoming a scribe a real ladder out of the fields, or was it a gate guarded by wealth and connections open to only a select few? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. It wasn't common, but it wasn't impossible. It required a staggering amount of luck, a willing sponsor, and a sharp mind. It was in its own way like winning a lottery you never knew you were playing. Your father, seeing the direction of your gaze, grunts. Do you see my son? That is a real man. He fights his battles with a reed pen, not a broken back. He commands others. He does not bake in the sun. There is no anger in his voice, only a deep, weary resignation. That evening, as you lie on your mat, every muscle in your small body throbbing with a dull, persistent ache, you can't get the image out of your head. The clean kilt, the smooth roll of papyrus, the power of just watching. You think about the life ahead of you, the one laid out like the irrigation ditches in the field. You will grow. Your shoulders will broaden. The yoke will be replaced by the plow. You will marry a girl from a nearby village. You will have sons, and you will teach them to haul water, and their backs will ache, and they will watch their sons do the same. The thought for the first time feels like a cage. You whisper the question into the darkness of the small hut. You ask your father if a boy, any boy, can learn the marks, can learn to be the man in white. Your father is silent for a long time, the only sound the soft chewing of the goat. When he finally speaks, his voice is a low rumble, softer than you're used to. He tells you it is a hard path, harder than the fields in its own way. It means leaving home. It means being beaten. It means years of study when your friends are learning to swim in the Nile. And it costs. It costs more than just effort. It requires a payment to the school, a sponsor. He doesn't have it. But maybe your mother's brother, a low-level priest in a nearby town, might see a spark in you. Maybe he could be persuaded. It is a fragile, terrifying sliver of hope. And as you drift into a sleep filled with visions of strange symbols and clean hands, you cling to it as a drowning man clings to a single reed. That fragile sliver of hope takes root. Weeks pass, the sun still bakes the yoke, still chafes your neck, but your mind is elsewhere. It's lost in the hushed conversation you overheard between your mother and father, in the rare visit from your uncle the priest. He was a man you barely knew, someone who smelled of incense instead of sweat. He looked at you, really looked at you for the first time. He made you count stones, asked you to repeat a story he told, watched your eyes to see if they followed his gestures. You felt less like a nephew and more like a promising animal being considered for purchase. Apparently you passed the inspection. A deal was struck. Your father promised a portion of his meager free yield for a full year. It was a crippling gamble. Your family would eat less so that you might one day provide them with more. The weight of that bargain settles upon you, a burden heavier than any yoke of water. The day you leave, your mother presses a small amulet of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, into your hand. She doesn't cry, but her grip is tight. Your father simply puts his hand on your head, a rare gesture of affection that says everything he cannot. You walk away with your uncle, not looking back, because if you did, you might run straight back to the familiar misery of the fields. The journey takes 2 days. You walk along the banks of the great river, past villages that are mirrors of your own, full of bent backs, and the endless creak of water lifts. For the first time, you ride on a crowded ferry, a clumsy wooden barge poled by sweating boatmen. The sheer number of people is overwhelming. The noise, the smells of spices, perfumes, and unwashed bodies, the chaotic energy of the town's market, it's a dizzying assault on your senses. Your village life was a quiet hum. This is a roar. Your uncle leads you through winding narrow streets past workshops where carpenters saw wood and potters spin clay, their lives of manual labor, suddenly looking far more skilled than you ever considered. This is where you first get a whiff of the famous satire of the trades, a text you will soon come to know intimately. It's the scribe's favorite piece of propaganda, a poem that viciously mocks every other profession. The blacksmith stinks like fish roe. The potter is smeared with soil, the weaver is cooped up like a woman. It's a bit of ancient Egyptian corporate team building designed to remind you repeatedly that you've chosen the right team. At the time, you just see the potter and think his hands look a lot like your father's. Finally, you stand before a tall mud brick wall, part of a sprawling complex that hugs the main temple of the town. This is the Pharaohs, the House of Life. The name is grand, promising enlightenment and eternity, but the entrance is just a modest wooden door, guarded by a bored-looking man with a spear. Your uncle murmurs a few words to the guard, and the door swings open. You step inside, and the noisy chaos of the street falls away, replaced by a low, serious murmur. You are in a courtyard shaded by a few struggling sycamore trees. All around its edges, sitting cross-legged on the ground or on low benches, are boys. Dozens of them. Some are your age, others are teenagers with the first shadows of beards, and a few are even younger, barely more than toddlers. They don't notice you. Their heads are bowed, their focus absolute. This is your first taste of terror and awe. The awe comes from the sense of profound importance that hangs in the air. This is a place where the world is shaped not by muscle, but by marks on a surface. This is where the king's decrees are copied, where the histories are preserved, where the sacred hymns to Ra are written down so they may be sung forever. It's a mainstream fact that these temple-attached schools were the engines of the entire Egyptian state. They produced the thousands of accountants, managers, priests, and officials needed to run the massive, complex machine of the kingdom. You're looking at the cogs of that machine in their earliest stages of formation. The terror is far more personal. It comes from the figure your uncle is now bowing to. He is an old man, impossibly old, his skin wrinkled and spotted like a ripening fig. He is the master scribe, the head of the school. His name is Neb-Hemmet, and he looks like he personally supervised the invention of writing. He sits on a proper chair, a sign of immense status, and his gaze is sharp and dismissive. He looks you up and down, a quick clinical scan. He tells you to hold out your hands. You do, and he turns them over, inspecting the palms. He clicks his tongue. The hands of a field hand, soft but ignorant. We will have to beat the farmer out of them. His voice is like the scraping of stones. He asks you a few questions, the same ones your uncle did. You stammer out the answers. He seems unimpressed but doesn't send you away. That you realize is the victory. He turns to your uncle, and they speak in low, clipped tones about your rations, your lodging, your duties. You understand very little, only that your life is being signed over. You are no longer just your father's son. You are a student of the House of Life, and your body and mind now belong to Neb-Hemmet. Your uncle gives you a final awkward pat, reminds you not to bring shame upon your family, and then he is gone. You are left alone, standing in the middle of the courtyard, holding your little amulet of Thoth so tightly it cuts into your palm. An older boy, maybe 15, nudges you roughly and points to an empty spot on the ground. Sit. Be quiet. Don't draw the master's eye. You scramble to obey, folding your legs into the unfamiliar cross-leg position. The ground is hard, not like the soft earth of the fields. A profound sense of loneliness washes over you. These other boys are your rivals, not your friends. They are all vying for the same limited positions of comfort and influence. You notice their clothes are of better quality linen than yours, their hair more neatly trimmed. They are the sons of artisans, soldiers, minor officials. You are an outsider, a son of the mud, and you can feel it. The master scribe claps his hands once, a sound as sharp and final as a closing door. The low murmur of the courtyard ceases instantly. The lesson begins. There are no friendly introductions, no explanation of the syllabus. An older student walks around handing out wooden tablets coated in a thin layer of smooth plaster. When one is thrust at you, you stare at it dumbly. It's a tool you don't know how to hold. The lesson is recitation. The master speaks a line from a text and the boys are expected to shout it back in unison. The words are meaningless to you, a stream of alien sounds. Your voice is a beat behind everyone else's, a clumsy echo. You see the master's eyes narrow in your direction. Your blood runs cold. You quickly learn that silence is safer than a wrong answer. Historians still argue whether the primary goal of this education was purely vocational or if it aimed to instill a deeper moral and ethical framework. Were you here just to learn how to count sacks of grain and write legal contracts, or were you being molded into a wise and just member of the ruling class, steeped in literature and philosophy? Looking at the stern face of Neb Hemmet, you suspect the answer is far more practical. He isn't trying to build your character. He's trying to forge you into a useful tool. The philosophy can come later, if at all. For now, it's all about the terrifying, overwhelming basics. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, you don't feel like you're in a house of life. You feel like you've been sentenced to a prison where the walls are made of words you cannot read. And as you're shown to a crowded room where you'll sleep on the floor with 20 other boys, the comfort of your family's mud brick hut feels like a lost paradise. The first weeks are a monotonous hell. Your life shrinks to the size of the dusty courtyard and the cramped sleeping quarters. Every day is identical. You wake before dawn, eat a small coarse loaf of bread that makes you miss your mother's baking with a painful lurch, and then you sit. You sit for hours, your legs cramping your back, aching, chanting sounds that have no meaning. The master, Neb Hemmet, paces before you, his staff tapping a steady, intimidating rhythm on the packed earth. You learn the names of things, chanting lists that have been recited in this very courtyard for 1,000 years. Lists of gods, lists of towns in the delta, lists of sacred oils, lists of different kinds of birds. You are a vessel being filled with words, but you have no idea what the words truly signify. It's like being taught a song in a language you don't understand. You can mimic the sounds, but the soul of it, the meaning, remains a perfect mystery. The older boys seem to understand. They chant with a confidence that infuriates you. When the master asks one of them to identify a symbol he has drawn in the dirt, the boy answers correctly and receives a curt nod, the highest form of praise Neb Hemmet seems capable of. When you are asked, you stare at the elegant shape, a bird with a long curved beak, and you say the only thing that comes to mind, ibis. The master's staff cracks against your outstretched palms with a speed that steals your breath. You are not here to name pictures, you little field dweller, he hisses, his voice low and dangerous. A farmer sees a bird. A scribe sees a god. He sees a soul. He sees a sound. You see a bird. You are still a farmer. The sting in your hands is nothing compared to the hot shame that floods your face. The other boys snicker. You learn to keep your mouth shut. For now, the beautiful, monumental symbols you've seen your whole life on the distant temple walls remain just that, art. Majestic, powerful, and utterly alien. You look at a carving of a man with a falcon's head, and you see a man with a falcon's head. You look at the wavy lines and see water. The seated man, the coil of rope, the little quail chick, they are all just pictures, a gallery of silent things. You begin to despair. Maybe the master is right. Maybe you can't beat the farmer out of your head. Maybe you only know how to see the world for what it is, not for the layers of meaning hidden behind it. This is a common hurdle, the first great wall every student must climb. Hieroglyphs are not a simple picture book language, and that's a mainstream historical fact that trips up people even today. They aren't an alphabet, and they aren't just pretty drawings. They are a maddeningly clever, multi-layered system. The breakthrough comes not with a thunderclap, but with a whisper of insight. During a lesson, Neb Hemmet is slowly drawing a series of signs in the dust. He draws the symbol for a mouth. You've chanted its name 100 times, He then draws a simple house, purr, and then he draws a loaf of bread, ta. He points to them. What do these things have in common? He asks the class. An older boy, the son of a general, stands and says they are all things vital to life. The master sighs, a sound of profound disappointment, as if he's just been told the Nile has decided to start flowing backwards for fun. No, he says, his eyes scanning the sea of blank faces. You are all still looking at the pictures. Stop looking. Listen. He points to the mouth symbol again. He says, emphasizing the sound. Then he draws the sign for a reed leaf. You know this one. It's a sound E. He puts them together. E, air, to go. He then rubs out the reed leaf and draws a symbol of a seated man with his hand to his mouth, a determinative sign you later learn signifies eating, drinking, or speaking. He points to the mouth sign again, and then the new sign, to speak. He isn't drawing the idea of a mouth anymore. He is using the picture of a mouth to write a sound. The mouth isn't a mouth, it's a letter. A jolt goes through you, a shock of pure, unadulterated understanding. It's as if a dark room has suddenly been illuminated. The symbols are not just pictures of things. They are symbols for the sounds that make up the words for those things. The quailed chick isn't just a bird, it's the oo sound. The horned viper isn't just a snake, it's the F sound. All the chanting, the endless lists of objects you've been memorizing, you weren't learning vocabulary. You were learning an alphabet of sounds disguised as a picture book. It's a ridiculously complicated way to design a language, really. A simple alphabet of 20-something letters would have saved everyone a lot of trouble and a lot of beatings. But that wasn't the Egyptian way. Why be simple when you can be beautifully, divinely complex? This is your first grasp of phonograms, the heart of the written language. But the complexity doesn't stop there. You begin to understand that some signs, like the symbol for the sun, can stand for the whole word Ra, all by themselves. These are logograms. And then you have the determinatives, the silent helpers at the end of a word. You might spell out the sounds for Haben, the word for ebony, but at the end you would draw a little picture of a block of wood just to clarify that you mean the material and not say a guy named Haben. It's a built-in system to avoid confusion. Suddenly, the world of writing cracks open for you. It's thrilling and terrifying. Historians still argue whether this complex script was a sudden, deliberate invention at the dawn of Egyptian civilization, or if it evolved slowly from cruder prehistoric symbols scratched onto rocks and pottery. Looking at the layers of intricacy, the way phonograms, logograms, and determinatives all weave together, you get the feeling this wasn't figured out over a weekend. It feels ancient, layered, perfected over generations. As your understanding grows, you're introduced to a new quirky frustration, hieratic. While you are slowly learning to draw the beautiful formal and time-consuming hieroglyphs, the ones fit for a pharaoh's tomb, you are also shown a completely different-looking script. This is the everyday cursive version, a kind of scribal shorthand. Every elegant glyph has a corresponding, quick and dirty, hieratic equivalent. The majestic falcon becomes a hasty squiggle. The seated man becomes 2 flicks of the wrist. It's like learning to print in beautiful calligraphy and in the same lesson being taught messy doctor's handwriting. This is what you'll actually use for 99% of your work scribbling notes on shards of pottery. The pretty glyphs are for monuments and gods. Hieratic is for business. Your world is no longer just mud. It is now a swirling universe of symbols that dance with meaning. A simple wavy line is not just water, it's the N sound. The owl is not just a bird staring at you with judgmental eyes, it's the M sound. The leg is not just a leg, it's the B sound. You walk through the town and the symbols you once saw as mere decoration on buildings and statues now whisper to you. They are no longer silent. They are a code, and you, a boy who just a few months ago was hauling buckets of muddy water, are finally beginning to learn how to break it. You have a very, very long way to go. You still can't write a single sentence, but for the first time you feel a flicker of the power your father spoke of. The power of the man in the clean white kilt. The world has cracked open for you, but the light that shines through is intimidating. Understanding the concept of the glyphs is one thing. Memorizing the hundreds upon hundreds of them is another task entirely. Your brain feels like a waterlogged sponge, saturated and heavy. Each day you are drilled on new signs, new combinations, new rules. An owl is M, simple enough, but it can also be used as a determinative for birds. And in certain ancient texts, it can stand for the concept of seeing in the dark. Every symbol is a nest of possibilities, and your mind buzzes with the effort of keeping them all straight. The initial thrill of discovery is quickly replaced by the grim reality of the workload. This isn't a game of insight anymore. It's a marathon of pure brute force memorization. And through it all, a quiet hum of anxiety begins to build in the back of your mind. It's a low thrumming that gets louder in the moments just before sleep, in the brief pause between swallowing a mouthful of dry bread and picking up your practice tablet. It is the weight of your father's hope. You are not just here for yourself. You are an investment. You are a walking, breathing gamble, the most daring one your family has ever made. Every lesson you struggle with, every time the master's staff stings your knuckles for a sloppy sign, you don't just feel your own failure. You feel the echoing disappointment of your father across the miles. You picture him in the fields, his back bent a little lower, his own food ration a little smaller, all for you. This feeling isn't just in your head. It becomes painfully real about 2 months into your studies. A merchant, a man who trades pottery up and down the river, arrives from your district. He finds you in the courtyard, a familiar face in a sea of strangers. He brings you a small, lumpy bundle tied with twine. It's from your mother. Inside, there are 6 dried figs, a small hard cheese, and a tiny woven bag of salt. To your classmates who nibble on delicacies brought by their servant-running parents, it's peasant food. To you, it is treasure. It is the taste of home, a physical manifestation of love. But the merchant also brings a message from your father delivered casually as he prepares to leave. He says the second barley harvest was not as rich as the gods promised the merchant relays. He says to work hard. He says he is counting the days until you can write a letter for him. The words so simple land like stones in your stomach. He is counting the days. The figs suddenly taste like ash in your mouth. Your education isn't some abstract pursuit of knowledge. It has a deadline. It has a practical purpose, and that purpose is to lift your family from the mud. The pressure is immense. The literacy rate in the vast kingdom of Egypt is, after all, shockingly low. A mainstream historical fact you're beginning to appreciate is that perhaps only one person in 100 can truly read and write. To be one of them isn't just to have a good job. It's to possess a form of magic. It's to be part of an elite 1%, and the entrance fee is sacrifice. Your family is paying that fee right now, in mouthfuls of food they are not eating. It's a slightly more stressful investment portfolio than bearing a few gold rings in the backyard. This pressure changes how you work. You are no longer just trying to avoid a beating from Neb Hemmet. You are running from the ghost of your family's hunger. You stay up late long after the other boys are asleep, tracing signs in the dust by the faint light of a single oil lamp in the corner of the room. You quietly chant the phonograms under your breath, the owl, the viper, the leg, the mouth, until your throat is raw. You begin to hoard your knowledge like a miser hoards copper. You watch the older boys, the ones who are already practicing on precious ostraca shards of pottery, and you try to copy their movements, their confidence. You see the future, and it has 2 paths. One ends with you sitting in the shade, wearing a clean kilt, and the other ends with you back in the fields. Your brief dream of a different life, nothing but a bitter memory, having failed the only people who ever mattered. No one has invented the phrase, no pressure, yet. You suspect if they did, Neb Hemmet would have it banned. Your understanding of family and duty begins to deepen. You learn about a peculiar and intimate use for your burgeoning skill, the letters to the dead. This is a quirky little habit of the Egyptians that you find deeply moving. If someone was having trouble, a legal dispute, an illness, a spat with a neighbor, they might write a letter to a deceased parent or spouse. They would leave the letter at the tomb, asking their loved one in the spirit world to intervene on their behalf, to put in a good word with the gods, or to stop haunting them if they were the cause of the problem. You realize with a start that this is the ultimate service you could one day perform. Not only could you manage your family's affairs in this world, but you could be their bridge to the next, their personal advocate to the ancestors. The ability to write isn't just about calculating taxes, it's about maintaining the eternal bonds of family. Historians still argue whether the formal, almost stilted language of ancient Egyptian letters truly reflects their inner emotional lives. Was a father's letter to a son always so focused on duty and success, or is that just the conventional style, a public mask, that hides the more universal, messy feelings of love, fear, and worry? When you read the practice letters, the master dictates letters from a pharaoh to a general, from an overseer to a subordinate. They are all about tasks and status. But thinking of your own father, of his gruff and rare affection, you suspect the truth is more complicated. The simple message he is counting the days wasn't just a command to work harder. It was also a coded message of hope, a confession of his faith in you, and a quiet plea not to be forgotten. The weight is both a burden that threatens to crush you and a strange, powerful fuel. It forces your hand to be steadier, your mind to be sharper. You are not just learning for yourself. You are learning for them, and you will not fail. The weight of your family's hope is a fire at your back. It pushes you past the exhaustion, past the monotonous drone of the lessons. You now understand the code, the secret language of the glyphs, but that was like being given a key without being shown the door. Now you must learn to use it. You must learn to make the signs yourself, to force your clumsy farmer's hand, to replicate the elegant shapes that have until now only existed in your mind or as drawings in the dust. The time for pure chanting is over. The time for writing has begun. You do not start with precious papyrus. That would be like giving a child a block of lapis lazuli to use as a skipping stone. Papyrus is for masters, for real documents, for words that are meant to last. You are a beginner. Your words are meant to be erased. And so you are given your first true tool, the one that will be your constant companion for the next few years, the writing board. It's a simple rectangular slab of wood, usually sycamore fig about the size of your forearm. It's surprisingly light, but its magic lies in its surface. It has been coated with a thin, smooth layer of gesso, a brilliant white plaster made from gypsum and glue. This pristine surface is your canvas. You are also given your first brush. It's not a pen. It is a thin stalk of rush. It's then chewed and frayed by you until it forms a tiny pliable brush tip. You're given a small palette with two shallow wells, one for a cake of black ink made from soot and gum, Arabic the other for red ink made from ochre. You mix a little water into the black cake and dip your rush brush. The feeling is electric. This is the first moment of creation. You are no longer just a listener, you are a writer. You lift the brush to the white gesso board full of a nervous, hopeful energy. Your first sign is supposed to be the Ankamationite, the symbol of life, a simple shape, an oval on top of a T. You've seen it 1,000 times. How hard can it be? Your hand shakes. A blob of black ink drips from the brush onto the perfect white surface, a tiny disaster. You press on, drawing the loop. It comes out wobbly, lopsided. The vertical line is crooked. It looks less like the symbol of eternal life and more like a strange top-heavy mushroom. Your heart sinks. Your hand-eye coordination, honed by years of tossing stones and hauling water, is utterly useless here. This requires a different kind of grace, a fineness of motor control that you do not possess. Neb Hammett walks past his shadow, falling over your pathetic attempt. He doesn't stop. He just makes a quiet sound in his throat, a little puff of air that conveys more disappointment than a 10-minute lecture. It's somehow worse. This is your new reality. Hours upon hours, day after day spent with this board. You write, you fail, and then you take a damp cloth and wipe the surface clean. The ink lifts away from the gesso, leaving a faint grayish ghost of your mistake, a specter of your failure. Then you do it again, and again. The reusability of the board is its greatest gift and its cruelest feature. Your errors are not permanent, but they are relentless. The board is a perfect metaphor for your education, a constant cycle of effort, error, and erasure, all in the hope that eventually something worth keeping will be left behind. The fact that actual examples of these practice boards have been dug up from the sands, some with a teacher's red corrections still visible over a student's black ink, is a profoundly humanizing piece of history. You can almost feel the frustration of a boy who lived 3,000 years ago, annoyed that his glyph for chick looked more like a fat lizard. Slowly, painfully, your hand begins to learn. The muscles in your fingers, accustomed to gripping a hoe, start to understand the delicate pressure needed for the rush brush. You learn to load it with just the right amount of ink to avoid the dreaded drip. Your circles become rounder. Your lines become straighter. You move from single signs to simple words. Ra, the sun god. It, father. Mut, mother. Then you graduate. You are deemed ready to copy something more substantial. You are introduced to a text called the Kemet, which translates to the summing up. The Kemet is a sort of beginner's textbook, And it is the driest, most self-important document you have ever encountered. It's a collection of model phrases and greetings designed to teach you the proper way a junior scribe should behave. It's full of sentences like, I have arrived from my town, I have come from my province, and do not be idle, do not be idle. It's less of a story and more of an employee handbook for the Egyptian civil service. Its secondary purpose seems to be reminding you how lucky you are to not be a potter or a washerman. You spend weeks copying out the stiff formal prose of the Kemetic way onto your gesso board, wiping it clean and starting over. The tedium is staggering, but you understand its purpose. It's not about the content, it's about the mechanics. It's about training your hand to form perfect, legible, hieratic signs without conscious thought. This is where the debate about the nature of this education really comes alive for you. Historians still argue whether the endless copying of lists and formal texts was merely a practical mnemonic device, or if it was a sophisticated method of imposing a rigid, ordered worldview upon the student. Was it just about learning words, or was it about learning your place? As you write out the list of the Pharaoh's titles for the 100th time, followed by the vizier, the high priest, the generals, and on, you can't help but feel that you are absorbing the very structure of the kingdom through your fingertips. You are learning the hierarchy of the universe and learning that your place as a scribe is comfortably in the middle, above the laborers, but far, far below the masters. One afternoon, as you are meticulously copying a phrase about the importance of being diligent, your mind wanders. You think of your father. You imagine writing a real letter to him, not with the stiff words of the Kemetic, but with your own. You would tell him about the noise of the town, about the taste of the bread, about the terrifying old man who is your teacher. You can't, of course. You don't have the words yet. But the desire to do so, the desire to connect, becomes a powerful motivator. It transforms the boring task of copying. The overseer is pleased with the industrious scribe into a necessary stepping stone. You need to master these empty phrases so that you can one day fill them with meaning. For now you are just a mimic, a living copy machine. But you dream of becoming a voice. There comes a day when Neb Hemmet stops beside you, picks up your gesso board, and gives a long, slow nod. Your heart hammers against your ribs. He has examined your copy of the Kemet, your neat columns of hieratic signs, and found them acceptable. For a terrifying moment, you think you've somehow graduated a prospect for which you are wildly unprepared. But his next action is far more mundane, and in its own way more significant. He gestures to a large basket in the corner of the courtyard, a basket you've seen older boys visit. Your bored days are done, he says, his voice as dry as dust. You will now write on that which is real. Do not waste the ink. You have been promoted. Your promotion is to a pile of what is essentially garbage. The basket is filled with ostraca. These are the notepads of ancient Egypt, the scrap paper of the past. They are flat shards of limestone chipped from the nearby hills, and broken pieces of pottery, the remains of countless shattered jars and bowls. They are plentiful, they are free, and they are your new reality. This is a well-established historical fact for every grand papyrus scroll. There were thousands of these humble ostraca used for school exercises, quick letters, laundry lists, and tax receipts. They are the unfiltered voice of the common literate man. Your grand promotion means you've graduated from an infinitely reusable surface to a pile of broken rocks and pottery. It feels less like a step up and more like a lateral move in the grand scheme of drudgery. You pick your first piece. It's a flake of pale limestone, surprisingly smooth on one side, rough on the other. It's cool and heavy in your hand, a satisfying weight. It feels more permanent than the gesso board. You can't just wipe this clean. A mistake here is a mistake forever, a monument to your incompetence until the shard is tossed back on the pile. The pressure is different. You dip your rush brush in the ink and prepare to write. The surface is nothing like the gesso. It's porous and the ink bleeds ever so slightly the fibers of the stone, pulling it into tiny spiderwebbing lines. It requires a faster, more confident hand. Your first few attempts are messy. The beautiful flowing hieratic you just mastered on the board looks clumsy and thick here. You have to learn the art all over again, adapting to a new medium. And what is the vital text you are trusted with on this new permanent medium? You are introduced to the scribe's anthem, the text you've heard whispers about, the cornerstone of scribal arrogance, the satire of the trades. Also known as the instruction of Duakati, It's a story a father tells his son Pee-Pee on the way to scribal school. A story that details in gloriously biased detail how unbelievably awful every other job is compared to the life of a scribe. You are tasked with copying it again and again and again. I have seen the metalworker at his task at the mouth of his furnace. You write your brush scratching against the limestone. His fingers are like the skin of crocodiles. He stinks more than fish eggs. Every day you come back to the pile of ostraca, find a fresh shard, and continue your work copying out the insults. You write about the barber who roams the streets looking for people to fleece the reed cutter who travels to the delta to get mauled by insects. The potter who is smeared with soil like one whose relations have died. You describe the sandal maker with his vats of stinking tannin and the washerman who cleans clothes by the riverbank, spending his days next to crocodiles. The text is brutal condescending, and you have to admit occasionally quite funny. It's the ultimate pep talk for someone in your position, a constant reinforcement that your suffering in the school is nothing compared to the suffering of everyone else. This endless repetition has a powerful psychological effect. At first you see it for what it is: propaganda. You think of your father, his hands calloused from the hoe, and you feel a pang of guilt as you write about the miseries of the farmer whose clothes are perpetually stiff and whose cries are ignored by the tax collector. But the message is relentless. Day after day, shard after shard, the words seep into you. Historians still argue whether the satire of the trades was taken as a literal description of society by its students, or if they recognized it as a piece of comedic hyperbole, an inside joke for the educated elite. For you, it's becoming a bit of both. You know it's exaggerated, but you also see the truth in it. You remember the stench of the tanning vats in the market. You remember the men working knee-deep in the dangerous canals. The satire works because it's rooted in a reality you know all too well. Slowly, almost without you noticing, a wall begins to build in your mind. A wall between you, the future scribe, and them, the laborers. Life settles into this new routine. The drudgery is immense, but there are small moments of rebellion. The ostraca, being worthless, offer a freedom the gesso board never did. Sometimes when you've finished a particularly boring passage about the woes of the fishermen, you flip the shard over. On the rougher backside where the master is unlikely to look, you practice a different kind of writing. You doodle. This is a quirky and wonderful tidbit from the past. Archaeologists have found countless ostraca that were used for just this. Alongside formal exercises, we find sketches of animals, caricatures, and rude little notes. You try to draw a baboon, the animal sacred to Thoth. It comes out looking more like a hairy dog. On another day after Neb Hemmet has been particularly harsh, you sketch a quick, angry caricature of him as a scrawny, pecking vulture. You immediately feel a jolt of terror and toss the shard deep into the basket of used pieces, your heart pounding. Was it worth the risk? Probably not, but the small act of defiance felt good. The pile of ostraca becomes your world. It is the physical record of your progress. At the end of each week, you can look at the stack of completed shards and see the tangible result of your labor. Your script becomes cleaner, faster, more assured. The words of the satire are now embedded in your memory. You can recite entire passages by heart. You have, through sheer mind-numbing repetition, mastered the foundational text of your future profession. You have learned your place. You are a scribe. And a scribe, as the text reminds you with its closing lines, is the one who directs the work of all people. For him there are no taxes, for he pays his tribute in writing. The promise, the prize for all this boredom is laid bare, and it is a prize worth fighting for. You've conquered the ostraca. Your hand no longer hesitates as it moves across the stone, and your mind no longer fumbles for the insulting descriptions in the satire of the trades. You can write about the crocodile-fingered metalworker in your sleep. You feel a sense of accomplishment, a belief that you have perhaps cleared the tallest hurdle. This belief lasts for approximately half a day. Your reward for mastering the foundational texts is the dawning, terrifying realization that they were merely the appetizer. Now the main course begins, and it is a banquet of memorization so vast it threatens to drown you. Your education now pivots. While the physical act of writing is still paramount, the focus shifts to what is in your head. A scribe is not valuable because he can copy. He is valuable because he knows. He is a walking repository of knowledge, a living, breathing database of law, literature, geography, and custom. You cannot simply look things up. The Library of Scrolls is reserved for masters and for archival purposes. You are expected to be the library. And so begins the grueling art of memory. The sheer volume of information you are expected to absorb is staggering. Your brain, which once reeled from learning a few hundred glyphs, is now being asked to hold entire volumes. The first category of text you must commit to heart is wisdom literature. These are the famous instructions collections of proverbs and advice passed down from a wise father to his son. You begin with the maxims of Ptahhotep, a vizier who served a king hundreds of years ago. It's a series of short, pithy rules for living a successful life. If you are a leader, be calm when you listen to the speech of a petitioner. You recite chanting in unison with a dozen other boys until the words lose all meaning and become pure sound. Do not stop him from emptying his body of what he has planned to tell you. A man in distress wants to pour out his heart more than to have his case won. Day after day, you are drilled on these maxims. They cover everything from how to behave at a rich man's dinner table, keep your eyes down, take only what you are offered to, how to manage your wife and household, fill her belly clothe, her back, but hold her back from gaining control. Historians still argue whether these instructions were intended as genuine guides to living a moral life, or if they were primarily pragmatic manuals for social climbing, teaching a young official how to flatter his boss and avoid political trouble. As you chant the words, you suspect it's a healthy mix of both. Much of the wisdom seems to boil down to a simple, timeless principle: don't make waves, keep your head down, and never ever annoy the man who signs your ration slips. After Ptahhotep comes Amenemope, another sage, whose instructions are more spiritual, more focused on humility and divine will. You memorize his words too. The texts are beautiful, full of elegant metaphors and genuine insight. This is a mainstream historical fact. This genre of wisdom literature was the bedrock of Egyptian culture, copied and revered for more than a millennium. But absorbing them is a monumental task. You develop little tricks, mental hooks to hang the phrases on. You associate a certain proverb with the face of the boy sitting next to you, another with the shape of a crack on the courtyard wall. You are building a memory palace, as it were, though yours is a dusty, noisy, and rather stressful palace. Just when you feel you might have a handle on the deep well of human wisdom, you are introduced to a new form of mental torture, the onomasticon. An onomasticon is essentially an encyclopedia, but without any of the interesting explanations. It is a list, a colossal, all-encompassing, mind-numbing list of everything in the created world organized by category. The most famous one, the one you must now learn, is the onomasticon of Amenemope, a different Amenemope, just to make things confusing. It begins logically enough with things in the sky, sun, moon, star, Orion, and then moves on and on and on. You are forced to memorize in order lists of gods, temples, and sacred festivals. You learn the names of all 42 nomes or provinces of Egypt. You learn the major towns of Nubia and Syria. You learn the titles of every official in the royal court, from the vizier down to the chief sandal maker of the king. You memorize lists of professions, types of ships, kinds of bread, varieties of beer, and species of fish. The sheer, unadulterated uselessness of much of this information is overwhelming. When you wonder, will you ever need to produce from memory a list of 17 different kinds of cakes? The onomasticon makes the satire of the trades look like a heart-pounding thriller. The way the Egyptians categorized their world is a quirky tidbit in itself. The list can seem bizarrely organized to your modern sensibilities. A list of liquids might be followed by a list of different kinds of wood, which is then followed by a list of personal enemies of the state. There's a logic to it, but it's an ancient logic, a way of seeing the world as a divinely ordered catalog. Your job is not to question the order, but to absorb it. You chant the lists until your tongue is thick. She-neck, a storehouse. Marquette, a warehouse. Ah, a stable. The words blur together. You fall asleep with lists echoing in your skull and wake up trying to recall the correct order of Nubian fortified towns. The fear of forgetting is constant. Neb Hemmet has a terrifying ability to spot a student who is merely mouthing the words. He will stop a recitation mid-chant and point his staff directly at you. He will bark, the 62 parts of the ox starting with the foreleg. Go! And in that moment of cold panic, your mind either produces the information or it goes completely horrifyingly blank. A blank mind earns you a sharp rap on the shoulders and the humiliation of having to write the entire list out 10 times on expensive, ostraca-wasting ink and time. You learn that memory is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. But it is also a finite space, and you feel it getting crowded, old knowledge being pushed into dusty corners to make room for the new. You are no longer a boy. You are a container, and your purpose is to be filled. Your mind is a crowded storeroom of lists and proverbs, a fragile library of knowledge that you are terrified of losing. The pressure to remember is immense, and the consequences of forgetting are immediate and physical. You learn this firsthand, not through instruction, but through experience. There is a famous proverb one that appears in the very text you are forced to copy. It is the unofficial motto of every school in the land of Egypt. A boy's ear is on his back. He listens when he is beaten. It's a rather poetic way of saying something very simple: pain is the best teacher. And in the house of life, under the watchful eye of Neb Hemmet, you will have many, many teachers. The discipline is not chaotic or born of pure anger. It is a structured, predictable part of your day. It is the quality control system for your education. A poorly formed glyph, a moment of daydreaming, a whispered word to your neighbor, all of it is noticed. Neb Hemmet seems to possess a divine ability to see everything at once. His wrath, when it comes, is not the hot, uncontrolled rage of a frustrated man. It is cold, precise, and calculated. It is a tool he uses to chip away at your imperfections, to sculpt you from a soft, lazy boy into a hard, efficient scribe. The main instrument of this educational philosophy is a long, thin cane made of acacia wood, polished smooth from years of use. You have seen it lean against his chair every day, a silent threat. You have seen older boys summoned to the center of the courtyard, ordered to bare their shoulders and receive 3 or 4 sharp, stinging cracks of the cane that leave angry red welts on their skin. They never cry out. They simply bow their heads, return to their spot, and pick up their work, their faces set like stone. The silence of the punished is more intimidating than any scream. It is the silence of acceptance. Your turn comes on a hot, sleepy afternoon. The air is thick with the buzz of flies and the monotonous drone of your classmates chanting a list of sacred lakes. You are exhausted. The words are a meaningless river flowing past you. Next to you, a boy named Back, who has a knack for finding trouble, catches your eye. With a tiny, almost imperceptible movement of his hand, he shows you a doodle he has been sketching on the back of his ostrakhan. It's a rather clever caricature of Neb Hemmet as a hippo wearing a kilt. A bubble of laughter rises in your chest. You try to stifle it, turning it into a cough, but it's too late. The chanting in the courtyard falters. Every head turns. Neb Hemmet's gaze is locked onto yours. You, he says, his voice dangerously quiet. And you, he points his staff at Back. Come here. Time seems to slow down. The walk from your spot on the dusty ground to the center of the courtyard feels like a journey of 1,000 miles. You can feel the eyes of every other student on you. There is no pity in their expressions, only a quiet relief that it is you and not them. This public nature of the punishment is a key part of the lesson. Your humiliation is a warning to them all. You stand before the master, your head bowed, your heart thumping a frantic rhythm against your ribs. He doesn't ask for an explanation. He doesn't need one. He knows the signs of idleness. The house of the scribe is not a place for monkeys to chatter. He says, his voice laced with contempt. You waste your family's bread. You waste the precious gift of this instruction. He picks up the cane. Perhaps a lesson on the back will sharpen the mind. He orders Back to go first. You watch your stomach twisting into a knot as your friend receives his punishment. Then it is your turn. You pull the top of your simple linen tunic down, baring your shoulders to the hot afternoon sun. You brace yourself. The first strike is a shocking explosion of pain, a line of pure fire drawn across your skin. The second and third follow in quick succession. The pain is sharp, clean, and utterly consuming. It blots out the heat that flies the faces of the other boys. There is only the searing pain and the shame. When it's over, you are ordered back to your place. You sit down, your back screaming in protest. You cannot lean back. Every breath feels like it scrapes against the raw welts. But you pick up your ostrakhan. You dip your brush in the ink. and you focus on the list of sacred lakes with an intensity you have never felt before. The lesson has been delivered. Your ear, as the proverb promised, is now firmly on your back. This is the mainstream documented reality of your education. The scribal texts themselves mention being beaten, and one school exercise even includes a list of transgressions like hating writing or loving pleasure that could earn a boy a trip to the wood, which likely meant being confined in a set of stocks or fetters. This quirky, grim detail shows just how formalized the system of discipline was. As the days turn into weeks, you learn that the cane is not the only tool of punishment. There is the soul-crushing boredom of being assigned extra work, copying the entire satire of the trades, 3 times over on a stack of the worst, most uneven ostraca. There is the humiliation of being made to stand in a corner for an entire day holding a heavy pot. For more serious offenses like fighting or being caught trying to sneak out to the market, there is the confinement room, a small windowless storeroom that smells of old papyrus and mice. 2 days in there with only bread and water is enough to quell the most rebellious spirit. You see the effect this has on all the boys, including yourself. A certain hardness forms around you, a shell of caution and feigned diligence. You learn to hide your thoughts to present a placid, attentive face to the master, no matter how bored or frustrated you feel. Historians still argue whether this constant threat of physical punishment created resentful and traumatized students, or if it was so culturally ingrained that it was accepted as a normal and even necessary part of growing up, much like a farmer accepts the harshness of the sun. You don't feel traumatized, you just feel trained, like a hunting dog that has learned to obey its master's whistle without question. The pain fades, the lesson remains. And the lesson is simple: do your work, do it well, and do not, under any circumstances, draw the master's eye. The welts on your back have faded to faint silvery lines, but the lesson is branded onto your soul. You have learned focus. You have learned to channel your entire being into the task at hand, because the alternative is a sharp, stinging reminder of your duty. This newfound, hard-won concentration is about to be tested in a completely new way. Your education moves beyond the world of words of poetry and proverbs and into the stark, logical, and unforgiving realm of numbers. It is time to learn mathematics, the silent engine that runs the entire kingdom. At first, it seems like a relief. Numbers are less ambiguous than words. A 7 is a 7. It doesn't have 3 different meanings depending on the context. You are introduced to the Egyptian way of writing numbers. It's a base 10 system which feels familiar, but it lacks the clever concept of place value. There is no 0. You have a different hieroglyph for each power of 10. A single vertical stroke is 1. A cattle hobble or a heel bone is 10. A coil of rope is 100. A lotus flower represents 1,000. A bent finger held up as if pointing is 10,000. A squirming tadpole or frog stands for 100,000. And for 1,000,000 you have the symbol of the god, He, a figure, kneeling with his arms raised to the heavens, as if trying to comprehend such a massive, impossible quantity. To write a number, you simply draw the symbols you need. The number 23 is 2 hobbles and 3 strokes. Simple enough. But writing the number 4762 requires 4 lotus flowers, 7 coils of rope, 6 hobbles, and 2 strokes. It's cumbersome, a real brute force approach to arithmetic. You can only imagine that being tasked with writing 999 would be a form of punishment, requiring a scribe to carve 54 separate, intricate glyphs. Still, addition and subtraction are fairly intuitive. You just group the symbols together or take them away. It is when you get to multiplication that your brain begins to ache in a new and interesting way. The Egyptians had a method for multiplication that was both ingenious and, to your mind, utterly baffling at first. It's a system based on doubling. Forget the multiplication tables you might imagine. There are none. There is only the power of 2. Neb Hemmet demonstrates on a large shared board. He wants to multiply 14 by 18. You do not learn a method for 14 times 18. Instead, you create a table. On one side, you start with 1 and keep doubling. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. On the other side, you start with 18 and keep doubling. 18, 36, 72, 144, 288. Your goal is to find the numbers in the first column that add up to 14. That would be 2, 4, and 8. So you tick off those rows. Then you add up the corresponding numbers in the second column, 36 plus 72 plus 144. You perform the slow, careful addition and arrive at the answer 252. It's a bizarre, roundabout process, but it works every time. It's a monumental historical fact preserved on texts like the Rind mathematical papyrus that this binary style system was the foundation of all their complex calculations. It meant that a scribe only ever needed to know how to double numbers and how to add. It was a simple system that allowed them to build a civilization, though you suspect the word simple is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. The true purpose of math, you quickly learn, is not abstract. It is intensely practical. You are not solving for X. You are solving for how many loaves of bread a temple needs to feed its priests, how many bricks are needed to build a siege ramp, or how much grain is owed in taxes from a farmer's field. The problems are word problems rooted in the daily grind of the bureaucracy you are destined to join. You calculate the pefsu, a measure of the strength of bread or beer based on how many units can be produced from one hechet of grain. You sweat over problems calculating the area of a farmer's land, a vital task for the state, especially after the annual Nile flood wipes away all the old boundary markers. You learn about the rope stretchers, teams of surveyors who used knotted ropes to reestablish right angles and redraw the lines of ownership that held society together. Then you are introduced to fractions, and you become convinced that the ancient mathematician who invented them was a cruel, cruel man. The Egyptian system almost exclusively used unit fractions, that is, fractions with a 1 in the numerator, 1318, 127. The only common exception was 23, which had its own special glyph. If you needed to work with a fraction like, say, 5/6, you couldn't. You had to express it as a sum of unit fractions, 1, 2, p to 1, 3. This quirky and maddening system meant that simple calculations could dissolve into a nightmare of conversions, all worked out in a special section of the papyrus written in red ink. The pinnacle of your mathematical training involves geometry. You learn the formulas for the area of a circle, which they calculated with surprising accuracy, the volume of a cylinder, and most impressively, the volume of a truncated pyramid. The problems are practical. How much grain can a conical granary hold? If you are building a ramp of a certain height and slope, how many mud bricks will you need? You marvel at the ingenuity of it all. They built monuments that have mystified the world structures of breathtaking scale and precision. And yet historians still argue whether their impressive practical achievements were based on a deep theoretical understanding of mathematical principles or on a set of highly effective memorized rules of thumb passed down through generations. Was your teacher Neb Hemmet training you to be a mathematician or just a very capable human calculator applying memorized formulas without ever asking why they worked? Looking at his stern practical face, you strongly suspect it is the latter. You find a surprising satisfaction in this new subject. Unlike the ambiguous wisdom of Ptah-hotep, a math problem has a correct answer. Getting it right provides a clean, clear sense of accomplishment. You begin to see the world differently, not just as a collection of things to be named in a list, but as a series of shapes and quantities to be measured and calculated. You look at a supply jar and wonder about its volume. You see a shadow stretch across the courtyard and wonder about the angle of the sun. You are moving beyond simple literacy. You are learning the skills to manage, to build, to quantify, and to control the world around you. And that you realize is a power far more tangible than knowing poetry. Years have passed. You can no longer count them on one hand. The sun-starved boy who stumbled into this courtyard is a stranger to you now. You are taller, your shoulders are broader, and your hands, once calloused from the yoke, are now smooth, save for the single permanent ink stain on your middle finger. Your mind, once a blank slate, is now a labyrinth of legal formulas, literary texts, mathematical procedures, and the endless lists that define the world. You have been hammered and forged in the crucible of the school, and you are nearing the end of your transformation. You are no longer a student who fears his master. You are an apprentice, confident in your skills, awaiting the final seal of approval. There is no grand ceremony to mark this passage. There are no hats to throw in the air, no tearful goodbyes. Graduation is a quiet, gradual affair, a slow dawning of recognition from your master. It culminates one afternoon when a visitor arrives at the house of life. He is not a parent or a merchant. He is an official from the local temple granary, a man named Pentu, whose own kilt is of a finer weave than Nebhemet's. He needs a new junior scribe and assistant to help with the ledgers. He has come to the source. You and two other senior boys are summoned. This is it. This is the final exam. It is a performance. Pentu sits beside Nebhamet on a proper chair, and you are called forward first. A fresh ostracon is placed before you. Pentu dictates a letter of complaint to a supplier of shoddy linen sacks. The language is complex, full of polite but firm official phrases you have memorized from model texts. Your heart is pounding, but your hand is steady. You learned long ago that a trembling hand is a sign of a trembling mind. You let the years of training take over. Your rush brush flies across the shard, the hieratic script flowing clean and sure. You don't hesitate. You know the correct honorifics, the proper phrasing for a subordinate clause, the right determinative to use for sack. You finish, bow your head, and step back. Next, Nebhemet points to a complicated diagram on a shared papyrus roll. A problem from the mathematical text. The granary is a cylinder, he says, his voice flat. Its diameter is 9 cubits. Its height is 10. How many car of grain can it hold? You have done this problem 100 times. You know the formula for the volume of a cylinder. You know the conversion rate from cubic cubits to car. You perform the calculations on a spare shard, your mind working through the multiplication by doubling the awkwardness of the unit fractions. You announce the answer. Nebhemet shows no emotion, but the visitor Pentu gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Finally, the ultimate test of a truly educated man. Nebhemet unrolls a literary scroll, the tale of Sinuhe, the epic story of an Egyptian courtier who flees into exile. He points to a passage at random. Read, he commands. The script is formal, elegant, hieratic, full of rare words and complex grammatical structures. You take a breath and begin to read aloud. The story of Sinuhe's lonely journey in a foreign land fills the quiet courtyard. Your voice is clear and confident. You are no longer just a boy chanting sounds. You are a storyteller, a conduit for the words of the past. When you finish the passage, you look up. Nebhemet's expression is, as always, unreadable. You wait for days. The uncertainty is a knot in your stomach. You see Pentu speaking with Nebhemet. You see him looking at your work, comparing it to that of the other two boys. You try to push it from your mind, focusing on your daily tasks, but the question hangs in the air: were you good enough? Historians still argue about the typical age a student completed his training. Was it a set number of years, or was it entirely dependent on individual aptitude and the availability of a patron? Meaning one boy might finish at 16 while another toiled until he was 20. You are 18 now. You have given a decade of your life to this place. You are ready. Then one morning Nebhemet calls your name, your actual name. He so rarely uses it that it sounds strange in his mouth. Come, he says. He informs you that the official Pentu was satisfied. You are to report to the temple of Amun's granary at the next full moon. You have the position. And then he says the words you have been dreaming of for 10 years. You have done well, Sesh. Sesh, scribe. He calls you a scribe. Not a boy, not a student, not a field dweller. A scribe. The word settles over you like a warm cloak. It is a title, a profession, an identity. It is the culmination of every beating, every drop of sweat, every sleepless night spent memorizing lists. You have earned it. You bow deeply, murmuring your thanks, your mind reeling. You think about the tradition you have learned, of the quirky expectation that a new scribe writes a letter of praise back to his master. In it, he is supposed to thank his teacher for his wisdom and, most importantly, for his discipline. You make a mental note to compose the most eloquent letter you can, one that specifically praises the educational properties of his acacia wood cane. It seems like the right thing to do. You spend your last few days in the House of Life, in a daze. The place looks different now. The courtyard where you once felt such terror now seems small and familiar. The other boys look at you with a new respect, a touch of awe. You are one of the ones who made it. You are their future, their hope. You feel a pang of nostalgia, a strange fondness for the very walls that once felt like a prison. You are leaving your childhood behind. The structured, predictable world of lessons and punishments is over. You are stepping into the world of work, of politics, of ambition, of paying for your own bread and beer. On your last day, You pack your few belongings, a spare tunic, the Thoth amulet your mother gave you so long ago, and a handful of practice ostraca you've kept. As you walk out the gate for the final time, you don't look back. The sound of the boys chanting a list of Egyptian kings fades behind you. You are a sesh. Your life is about to begin. And as you walk toward the temple granary, a new kind of fear mingled with exhilaration takes root. The fear of failure is no longer about a beating. It's about disappointing your first employer, about making a costly mistake in a ledger, about proving that your family's immense sacrifice was not in vain. You have left the nest. Now you must learn to fly. You walk through the bustling streets of the town, no longer a student scurrying to avoid drawing attention, but a man with a destination. You are a sesh, and you are on your way to your first day of work at the temple granary. But you cannot arrive empty-handed. The title is not enough. You must possess the instruments of your office. The shared battered equipment of the house of life is behind you. Now you must assemble your own toolkit, the objects that will define your professional identity and be your constant companions for the rest of your life. Your first task as a scribe is to acquire your palette. The scribal palette is more than a tool. It is a badge of honor, a tangible symbol of your new status. To carry one is to announce to the world that you are part of the tiny literate elite. It is a key that unlocks doors to power and influence. While the vizier may carry a staff of office, you will carry a palette. It is your scepter, your shield, and your livelihood all rolled into one. You will likely treat it with more reverence and care than you would your future firstborn child. Historians still argue about how a junior scribe, often from a modest background like yours, would acquire his first high-quality palette. Was it a standard part of his first salary, a gift from his new patron Pentu? Or did he have to go into debt to a craftsman to purchase the essential tool of his trade? For you, luck is on your side. Your old master, Neb Hemet, in a rare and shocking display of something approaching generosity, presented you with a parting gift. It is a simple wooden palette, not of ivory or ebony like a high official would own, but of fine, smooth sycamore. It is unadorned, but it is new, and it is yours. You hold it in your hands. It is a long, flat, rectangular piece of wood about the length of your forearm and 4 fingers wide. Near one end is a long, carved-out slot, a sunken channel designed to hold your brushes. At the other end are 2 circular depressions, 2 shallow wells carved side by side into the wood. They are waiting to be filled. The palette feels solid, balanced, and full of potential. It is a blank slate, much like you were when you first arrived in this town. But a palette is useless without the things it is meant to hold. You set about completing your kit. First, the brushes. You walk to the banks of a quiet canal away from the chaos of the main river harbor. Here the rushes grow thick and green. You select several stalks of just the right thickness, cutting them carefully at the base. Over the next few days, you will let them dry until they are firm but not brittle. Then you will take each one, and just as you were taught, chew the end patiently, carefully, separating the fibers to create a fine, responsive brush tip. The taste of the reeds is grassy and familiar. It's a humble grounding process. After years of using the school's shared mangled brushes, chewed by who knows how, many other boys, the thought of having your own clean, perfectly formed set is a luxury you can barely comprehend. Next, and most importantly, is the ink. You do not buy your ink, you make it. This is a fundamental skill, a quiet ritual that connects you to the very substance of your craft. You need 2 colors, the 2 wells in your palette, dictating the eternal duality of a scribe's work, black and red. The black ink is for the body of the text, for the mundane and the essential. You acquire a small amount of fine soot scraped from the inside of a cooking pot. You spend the better part of an afternoon grinding it with a smooth stone pestle in a small bowl, breaking it down into a powder so fine it feels like silk, a black cloud that stains your fingers. The red ink is for headings, for totals, for the names of gods, and for marking corrections. It is the color of emphasis, of power, and of sanctity. For this you use a lump of red ochre, a natural earth pigment. You grind this as well, the rhythmic scrape and tap of your pestle, the only sound in your small room. The resulting powder is a deep earthy red, the color of dried blood and desert sunsets. Once you have your pigments, you mix each with a binder, a sticky gum collected from the acacia tree, which will hold the ink together. You add a little water, working it into a thick paste, and then you carefully press the paste into the two wells of your palette. You leave it to dry in the sun, where it hardens into a solid cake like a modern watercolor tablet. To write, you will simply touch a wet brush to the cake. The process is laborious and messy. Making ink is not the glamorous part of the job, but the pride you feel looking at your filled palette is immense. You made this. This power to make a permanent mark is your own creation. As you assemble your kit, adding a small smooth pebble to use as a paperweight and a linen rag for wiping the palette clean, you engage in a quiet, quirky tradition. Many scribes would inscribe a small prayer on their palettes, a dedication to Thoth, the ibis-headed patron of their profession. You have no room for a full inscription, but you hold the finished palette in your hands and whisper a silent prayer to the God of wisdom. You ask for a steady hand, a clear mind, and a career free of catastrophic mathematical errors. You ask for his guidance so that your words may be true and your calculations just. The palette now feels complete, not just a tool, but a sacred object blessed and ready. Your kit is assembled. The palette, with its two colors of ink, a half-dozen sharp reed brushes nestled in their slot, a water pot made from a hollowed-out gourd, a smoother made from a polished river stone. This is your office. This is your life, portable and potent. You bundle it all together and hold it under your arm. It has a satisfying heft. It is the weight of your future, the physical manifestation of your father's hope and your own hard-won skill. You are no longer the boy from the fields. You are the man with the palette. You arrive at the temple granary, your new palette held tightly under your arm. The place is a hive of activity, a walled compound filled with vast beehive-shaped silos for storing grain. The air is thick with the sweet, dusty smell of barley and the shouts of laborers hauling heavy sacks. Your new master, the official Pentu, greets you with a brief nod and leads you to your new workstation. It's nothing more than a small shaded section of a portico, a space on a bench you will share with another more senior scribe. But to you it feels like a palace, and it is here that you are introduced to the surface upon which history is made. Pentu hands you a slender, tightly bound roll. It is the color of pale honey, and it feels impossibly light and delicate. This is papyrus. You have seen it before, of course, in the hands of Neb-Hemmet or other important officials. But you have never been allowed to touch it. For years, your world has been the rough, unyielding surfaces of gesso boards and broken pottery. The idea of writing on something so fine, so obviously expensive, is terrifying. You feel a jolt of anxiety that is sharper than any fear the cane ever inspired. Making a mistake on an ostrakhan meant wasting a piece of trash. Making a mistake on this feels like it would be a crime against the gods themselves. You unroll a small section of the scroll. The sound is a soft, satisfying rustle. The surface is smooth beneath your fingertips, but not perfectly so. You can see the faint lines of its construction, a delicate grid of horizontal and vertical fibers, a testament to its organic origin. It has a faint, clean smell, a hint of dried reeds in the river. After years of writing on stone, this feels like a luxury you have not earned. It's a quiet miracle, this paper from a weed. As you sit there hesitating to make your first mark, you think about the journey this remarkable material has taken to get to you. You picture the marshes of the Nile Delta, a world away from the dry heat of your town. You see the papyrus plants. Cyperus papyrus. Growing in dense thickets in the shallows, their long triangular stalks rising up to 3 times the height of a man, crowned with feathery, bursting heads. You imagine the harvest team's men wading waist-deep in the murky water, cutting the thick stems and bundling them onto flat-bottomed skiffs. From the marsh, the stalks are brought to workshops on dry land. Here, the outer green rind is stripped away, revealing the creamy white pith within. This pith is the heart of the plant, the source of the magic. Workers slice it with deft movements of a bronze knife into long, thin, translucent ribbons. The quality of the final sheet depends entirely on the skill of the cutter and the part of the pith he uses. Then comes the assembly. On a flat, wet surface, a worker lays down a row of these papyrus strips, each one slightly overlapping its neighbor. This is the first layer. A second layer is then placed on top, with the strips running perpendicular to the first, creating a cross-hatched mat of fibers. This two-ply structure is what gives papyrus its strength. Historians still argue about the exact techniques used to bond these strips together. Was the plant's own sticky sugary sap released by the pressure truly sufficient to create a lasting glue? Or did the workers need to add a starchy paste? Or was there something special in the Nile water they used to wet the boards? Whatever the secret, the result is remarkable. The wet mat of fibers is then hammered with a wooden mallet, the steady rhythmic beating fusing the layers into a single cohesive sheet. The sheet is then put in a press squeezed between heavy stones to force out the last of the water and left to dry under the hot Egyptian sun. Once dry, the new sheet of papyrus is not yet ready. Its surface is still slightly rough. A worker takes a polisher, a smooth rounded stone, a piece of ivory, or even the shell of a large mollusk, and rubs the surface for hours, burnishing it to a hard, smooth finish, perfect for receiving the ink from your brush without bleeding. Finally, individual sheets are glued together at the edges with a flour-based paste one after another to form a long scroll. The standard scroll is about 20 sheets long, but some ceremonial or important legal documents could stretch for 40 meters or more. The finished rolls are then sent from the Delta workshops to every corner of the kingdom, a precious, state-controlled commodity. You look down at the scroll in front of you, a new appreciation for its value dawning in your mind. This wasn't just grown, it was engineered. It embodies the ingenuity of your entire culture. Pentu, perhaps sensing your hesitation, hands you a smaller, messier-looking piece of scrap papyrus for practice. It's a palimpsest, a quirky and frugal invention of the scribal class. Because papyrus was so valuable, old documents with outdated information would often be washed, the old ink scrubbed away with a wet rag, leaving a faint, ghostly image of the previous text behind. You can just make out the faded lines of an old grain receipt under your own practice strokes, the ancient equivalent of trying to write over a child's faint crayon drawings. You take a deep breath, dip your brush, and make your first mark on true papyrus. The ink glides onto the surface, a perfect, crisp, black line. It doesn't bleed. It doesn't scratch. It is a feeling of pure, unadulterated pleasure. This is the material you were born to write on. This is the skin that will hold the words of your civilization for eternity. And as you begin your first real task, copying a tally of grain sacks from a pile of rough ostraca onto this pristine, beautiful scroll, you feel the immense gap between the two worlds. The ostracon was for the draft. The papyrus is for forever. Weeks turn into months at the granary. The initial terror you felt when handling papyrus has subsided, replaced by a comfortable, respectful familiarity. You have fallen into the rhythm of the work, copying inventories, drafting receipts, and calculating rations. Your senior colleague, a taciturn old scribe named Ip, barely speaks to you, but you learn by watching his efficient movements the way he can unroll, write, and re-roll a scroll in one fluid motion. Your life is governed by the steady, quiet scratch of your brush on the page, and it is this constant work that leads to a new practical problem: you are running out of ink. The little black cake in your palette, the one you made with such pride, has been worn down by water and work until it's just a thin, concave wafer at the bottom of its well. The red is not far behind. You show this to your master Pentu, expecting him to issue you new supplies from a temple storeroom. He just laughs, a short, barking sound. You are a scribe boy, not a pharaoh. We don't get ink, we make crink. IP will show you. Pay attention. A scribe with no ink is just a man who can read. It appears your job description included the unwritten duty of being a part-time chemist. The next morning, the senior scribe IP leads you not to a desk, but to a dusty workshop at the back of the temple complex. Here he will teach you the proper way to brew a batch of ink large enough to supply the office for a season. This is not the small personal ritual you performed after graduation. This is production. First, the black. You learn that the quality of the carbon is everything. While soot scraped from any cooking pot will do in a pinch, the finest, blackest, most permanent ink comes from the soot of burning oil lamps. It's a purer, finer carbon. IP shows you a series of small terracotta lamps that have been left to burn with a smoky flame in a contained space, allowing a delicate, velvety black powder to collect on a limestone slab placed above them. Your job is to scrape this precious black dust into a large stone bowl. It's incredibly light and volatile. A stray breath sends it billowing into the air, staining your face and tunic. Once you have a respectable pile, the real work begins: grinding. With a heavy stone pestle, you must grind the soot for hours. The goal is to break down any clumps to render the pigment as impossibly fine as you can. It's monotonous, meditative work. Your arm aches, but IP watches occasionally running a pinch of the powder between his thumb and forefinger to test its texture, grunting when it's not yet fine enough. While you grind, he prepares the binder. This is the glue that will hold the pigment to the papyrus. It is gum arabic, the semi-transparent amber-like resin that seeps from the acacia tree. IP has chunks of it that he dissolves in water, creating a sticky, viscous liquid. The ratio is the secret. Too much binder and the ink will be thick, shiny, and prone to cracking when it dries. Too little, and it will be weak, dusty, and will flake off the scroll with the slightest touch. IP measures by eye, a skill born of decades of practice. He mixes your finely ground soot with his binder, stirring it into a thick, syrupy black sludge. This concoction is then poured into molds, a series of shallow, circular depressions in a clay tray, and left to dry into the familiar solid cakes. Next, you move on to the red ink, the sacred color. The process is similar, but the pigment is different. It's not light and fluffy soot, but heavy, gritty red ochre, a mineral dug from the desert hills. It is essentially rust iron oxide, but it produces a wonderfully deep and permanent red. Grinding the ochre is harder work. It's like trying to crush stone into dust. As you work, you appreciate the symbolism even more. Black ink is for the everyday, the words. Red ink is for the important, the numbers, the headings, the names of gods. It's the color of authority. To use it in the wrong place in a document would be a serious, embarrassing blunder. Napi shares a fascinating, quirky detail of the craft, a recent innovation he has heard about from a high-end workshop in Thebes. He tells you that some master ink makers have started adding other things to their brews. Recent analysis has shown that they weren't wrong. Some ancient inks contain traces of metal, like lead or copper. These weren't for color. They were likely added as drying agents, catalysts that help the ink set more quickly and adhere more strongly to the papyrus fibers. It's a surprisingly complex piece of chemistry, a trick worthy of a Renaissance painter, discovered by your ancestors through trial and error. You wonder if your next batch will be unleaded. As you watch the new ink cakes drying in the sun, a slow and profoundly boring process, you consider the origins of this knowledge. Historians still argue whether these ink-making recipes were common knowledge among scribes passed down casually from master to apprentice, as it is being to you, or if they were closely guarded secrets. Perhaps certain temple workshops were famous for their superior, more vibrant, or more permanent inks. Their specific recipes a source of immense pride and value. Looking at IP's stern, proprietary manner, you get the feeling he wouldn't share his knowledge with just anyone. You are being led into an inner circle. This is the hidden labor of your profession. The glory is in the finished scroll, the perfectly balanced ledger, the elegantly written letter. But the foundation of that glory is here in the dust and grime of the workshop, in the ache of a grinding arm, and the simple, profound chemistry of soot and ochre. You are not just a writer, you are a craftsman. You have learned that to create the words that will last for eternity, you must first get your hands very, very dirty. You have your tools, you have your space, and you have a steady supply of ink. The romantic, terrifying dream of becoming a scribe has been realized. Now you get to experience the reality, and the reality you quickly discover is dust. It's a fine, pale dust, mostly from the grain, that coats every surface in the granary. It gets in your nostrils and your throat and settles in a thin film on your papyrus scroll if you leave it unrolled for more than a few minutes. The satire of the trades and all its poetic mockery of other professions conveniently failed to mention the soul-crushing boredom that is the primary occupational hazard of a junior inventory scribe. Your posting is for all intents and purposes in a large, dusty warehouse. The temple granary is the economic heart of the region, a central depot where the wealth of the land measured in food and goods is collected, stored, and redistributed. Your job, your glorious purpose as a member of the literate elite, is to count things. All day, every day. You sit on your bench in the shaded portico, a pile of rough ostraca at your side, and you watch the endless parade of labor. Teams of shirtless, sweating men haul in sacks of barley from a nearby estate. Others carefully carry pottery jars filled with beer from the temple brewery, their clay stoppers sealed with mud. Bolts of rough linen, destined for the priest's robes or the workers' loincloths, are stacked in towering, precarious piles. You are the gatekeeper of this flow of goods. Nothing comes in or out without being tallied by you or your silent colleague IP. A train of 10 donkeys arrives, each laden with 2 large sacks of emmer wheat. The donkey driver, a man whose skin is the color and texture of a dried fig, calls out to you. You leave your bench, grab a shard of limestone, and walk over. Your job is to count the sacks, check the quality of the seals, and make a note. 10 donkeys, 20 sacks of emmer from the estate of Conifer. You scratch the note in swift, practical hieratic onto the ostracon. This is not work for precious papyrus. This is the rough draft of the economy. The interactions are brief and transactional. You are now the man in the clean kilt, a figure of authority. You have the power to reject a delivery if the beer jars are leaking, or if you spot the telltale signs of weevils in a grain sack. This gives you a sliver of power you never had before, but it also creates a subtle friction between you and the laborers. They see you sitting in the shade while they toil in the sun, and you can sometimes feel their resentment, a silent judgment that you are no better than them, just luckier. The dream of being a powerful scribe feels very far away when you're arguing with a porter who is trying to convince you that a cracked beer jar probably just happened on the way over. The Egyptian state was at its core a massive command economy, a mainstream historical fact that you are now experiencing from the inside. There was no widespread currency. The entire system ran on the collection and redistribution of goods. Grain was wealth. Beer and bread were salary. Your job as a scribe is to be the human software that runs this vast, complex operating system. The meticulous records you keep are not just bookkeeping. They are the threads that hold the entire social and economic fabric together. The work is endlessly repetitive. You tally the incoming goods on your ostraca. At the end of the day, you take your stack of dusty shards back to your bench. Now you unroll a fresh sheet of papyrus from the daily ledger scroll. You carefully, meticulously transfer the day's totals from the rough drafts onto the permanent record. You use your finest script. You use the red ink for the headings and the final totals. This daily ledger will, at the end of the month, be compiled by your boss Pentu into a summary report that will be sent to a higher official in Thebes. Your small, dusty corner of the world is a single cog in a bureaucratic machine of immense size and complexity. The most exciting part of your day is often discovering that a rat has chewed through one of the linen sacks, requiring you to make a special note in the ledger under losses. You become fluent in the quirky, specific language of administrative dockets. A jar of beer isn't just a jar of beer. It's marked with its year of production according to the reign of the Pharaoh, the name of the brewery it came from, and a quick notation of its quality phrases like good, very good, or sometimes just for the army, which is a polite way of saying it's barely drinkable. You learn hundreds of these little codes and symbols. It's a language within a language, the secret dialect of the bean counters. With this level of meticulous accounting for every single sack of grain and jar of beer, a thought naturally occurs to you. It would be so easy, so simple, to misrecord a number. To note the delivery of 19 sacks instead of 20, and for that 20th sack to find its way to your own small home. This temptation is the silent ghost that haunts the warehouses of Egypt. Historians still argue about the true level of corruption within this vast bureaucracy. Were scribes like you generally honest accountants bound by their professional pride and fear of the gods, or was it common practice to skim a little off the top and fudge the numbers? Looking at the weary, underpaid laborers and your own modest rations, you understand the temptation. But you also know the penalty for being caught is severe. For now, your fear of punishment is greater than your desire for an extra loaf of bread. You are a scribe. You have escaped the backbreaking labor of the fields. But as you sit on your bench, the dust settling in your hair, tallying your 500th sack of barley for the week, you can't help but feel a strange sense of anticlimax. You have traded a life of physical exhaustion for a life of mental stagnation. This is the bottom rung of the ladder, and it's a long, long way to the top. The sun finally dips below the western cliffs, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and soft orange. The day's counting is done. You carefully roll the ledger, tie it with a strip of linen, and place it in a locked wooden chest. Your senior colleague IP has already vanished, disappearing towards his own home in another part of the temple complex. For you, the day is not quite over, but the nature of your life is about to change. You leave the dusty silence of the granary behind and walk towards your new home, the scribe's quarters. This is where you live now in a sector of the vast temple grounds reserved for junior officials, priests in training, and scribes like yourself. It is by any measure a significant upgrade from your family's mud brick hut. For one, it doesn't have a goat living in the corner staring at you with unnerving intensity. The small two-room house you are allotted is clean and whitewashed. It feels spacious, almost decadent, but it is not a private sanctuary. It is part of a community, a small village of the literate nestled within the larger world of the temple. Your neighbors are your colleagues, your rivals, and your only real peers. The air here is different from the warehouse. The scent of grain dust is replaced by the smell of wood smoke from cooking fires and the faint, pleasant aroma of baking bread. The sounds are softer too. There are no overseers shouting or laborers grunting under heavy loads. Instead, you hear the low murmur of conversation, the clatter of pottery, and the occasional burst of laughter. This is the sound of the administrative class at rest. You quickly learn that the rigid hierarchy of the office extends into the evening. The senior scribes like Pentu live in larger private homes with their families. The mid-level men have their own modest houses. And then there are the barrack-style homes for the junior bachelors like yourself. You share a small courtyard and a communal oven with three other young scribes, all of you swimming in the same big pond, hoping to eventually become bigger fish. The centerpiece of your evening is the shared meal. Your salary, your ration is delivered weekly, a set amount of grain jars of beer onions, garlic, and occasionally some dried fish or a handful of dates. You and your housemates pool your resources. Tonight, a boy named Kenneman who works in the office of the cattle counters is baking the bread while you are tasked with fetching the water. The meal is simple flatbread, a thick onion stew, and a large cup of beer, but after a long day of work, it is deeply satisfying. It is here around the low table in the courtyard that the real life of a scribe unfolds. The talk is not of literature or the gods, it's of work. You complain about your bosses, about the impossible deadlines, about the mind-numbing repetition of your tasks. You learn that Kenneman is having trouble with a herder who keeps trying to pass off sick calves as healthy, and another scribe who works for the temple construction crew spends half an hour complaining about the quality of the latest shipment of limestone. You realize with a jolt of amusement that this is a universal truth of any profession in any era. The most cherished pastime is complaining about the job. Historians still argue whether the professional camaraderie among scribes created genuine lasting friendships, or if the intensely competitive and hierarchical nature of their careers meant that most relationships were merely temporary alliances of convenience, easily discarded for a chance at promotion. You see evidence of both. There is a real sense of shared experience. Only these men understand the unique pressure you are under, the frustration of a smudged line of ink on a fresh sheet of papyrus, or the triumph of balancing a particularly difficult ledger. But you also notice the subtle jockeying for position, the casual name-dropping of a senior official, the slight exaggeration of one's own importance. You are all friends, but you are also all rivals, watching each other, measuring each other's progress. After the meal, as twilight deepens into true night, the games begin. The most popular by far is Senet. This is a quirky and beloved pastime you see played everywhere. Kenneman owns a simple but well-made board, a grid of 30 squares arranged in 3 rows of 10. Instead of dice, you use 4 flat throwing sticks, black on one side and white on the other, the combination of how they land determining how many squares you can move your carved playing pieces. The game is a race to get all your pieces across the board and off the other side. It is a game of skill and pure luck. But it's more than just a game. It is a microcosm of the Egyptian worldview. The 30 squares represent the days of the month. The journey across the board symbolizes the journey of the soul through the Duat, the underworld. Several of the squares are marked with special hieroglyphs. Landing on the square of water sends you back to the beginning. Landing on the square of beauty or goodness gives you an extra turn. The final squares represent the final judgment and the ultimate goal of reaching the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. Losing a game of Senet feels in a small, silly way like a genuine spiritual setback. You find your place in this small, insular world. You learn which scribes are trustworthy, which ones are ambitious, which ones tell the best jokes. You carve out a routine. You work, you eat, you talk, you play. You are no longer just the boy from the fields, nor are you just the terrified student of the house of life. You are a junior scribe in the Temple of Amun, a member of a profession, a resident of a community. It is not the life of power and prestige you once dreamed of, not yet. But as you lie on your sleeping mat listening to the soft snores of your housemates and the distant sound of a temple chant, you feel a sense of belonging, of having found a foothold in a new and complicated world. For the first time, you feel something akin to peace. The peaceful routine of the granary and the quiet evenings in the scribe's quarters become your life. You have found a rhythm. It is safe, it is predictable, and it is, if you are being honest with yourself, crushingly dull. You are an accountant for the gods, ensuring their earthly enterprise turns a profit one sack of barley at a time. But then one day the rhythm breaks. A summons arrives from the main temple sanctuary. The chief lector priest, the head of the house of life, requires an assistant for a special project. Your master Pentu has put your name forward, mentioning that your hand is neat and your calculations are so far free of embarrassing errors. You leave the familiar dust of the granary and walk towards the heart of the temple complex, to the very Pharaohs where you once toiled as a boy. But you enter now not as a terrified student, but as a professional on assignment. The air inside is just as you remember it, cool still, and smelling of incense and ancient papyrus. The scribes here are not the harried accountants you work with. They are priests. Their white linen is of the highest quality, their heads are shaved, and their movements are slow and deliberate. Their work is not commerce, it is worship. You have stepped out of the accounting department and into the sanctuary. Your first task is administrative, but with a sacred weight. A wealthy noblewoman on her deathbed has donated a large tract of farmland to the Temple of Amun to secure her place in the afterlife. You are tasked with drawing up the official deed. This is not a simple tally on an ostracon. This is a legal document meant to stand for all time. You are given a fresh roll of the finest quality papyrus. You must use the most formal, intricate legal language, citing the correct precedents and ensuring every clause is perfectly worded. The language is somehow even drier than your granary ledgers, a long list of boundaries, witnesses, and contractual obligations. You realize with a touch of humor that even the gods have an enormous amount of paperwork. An error here, a misplaced glyph, could create a legal loophole that might be exploited a century from now. The pressure is immense. Once that is complete, you are given a task that makes your blood run cold with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The lector priest leads you to a special chamber, a library where the temple's most sacred scrolls are kept. He points to a papyrus that is darkened with age, its edges crumbling away. It is an ancient collection of hymns to Amun-Ra, and it is disintegrating. Your duty is to create a new perfect copy before the words are lost to silence forever. This is the scribe's most sacred duty. You are not just copying words, you are preserving the divine. You cannot use your quick, efficient hieratic script here. You must use the full, beautiful, monumental hieroglyphs, the language of the gods themselves. Every stroke of your brush is a prayer. Before you begin, you must perform a ritual, purification, washing your hands and mouth. You lay the new papyrus next to the ancient one, your hands shaking slightly. You work in absolute silence, forming each owl, each viper, each seated god with the utmost care. This isn't about speed, it's about perfection. A single smudge feels like a blasphemy. No pressure, you think it's only the eternal word of the creator of the universe. Try not to drip. As you work copying the elegant ancient phrases praising the sun god, you grapple with a question that theologians and scribes have likely pondered for centuries. Historians today still argue about the personal piety of the men who performed this duty. Were they all deeply devout believers, their souls stirred by the holy words they transcribed? Or were some of them just highly skilled technicians, a bit cynical, even viewing the sacred texts as just another, more prestigious type of dictation? You look at the lector priests around you, their faces serene masks of concentration. You wonder what they truly believe. For your own part, you feel a profound sense of awe. You are touching the divine, creating a vessel for words that are believed to have magical, life-sustaining power. You may have come here as a technician, but the work is transforming you into a believer. Your final task in the House of Life is to prepare the inventories for the upcoming festival of Opet, a major celebration where the statue of Amun travels from Karnak to Luxor Temple. The efficacy of the festival, its ability to rejuvenate the gods in the land, depends on the rituals being performed with absolute precision. And that precision begins with your list. You must document the exact quantities of the required offerings, so many jars of the finest Libyan olive oil, so many chests of frankincense from the land of Punt, so many bolts of red-dyed linen, so many sides of beef. An error on your grain ledger might lead to a budget shortfall. An error on this list could offend a god. The stakes feel significantly higher. In this rarefied atmosphere, you hear whispers of a quirky semi-heretical practice. It is said that some scribes, when copying a sacred text, would embed a tiny, almost invisible intentional error or variation, a uniquely shaped glyph, a subtle acrostic hidden in the first letters of each line as a sort of personal signature, a secret mark known only to them and their God. It's a way of weaving their own soul into the eternal tapestry of the text. You contemplate the idea for a moment, the thought of adding a single flawed reed leaf glyph to the hymn that no one would notice for 1,000 years. The audacity of it is thrilling, but your fear of the lector priest, a man far more terrifying than Neb-Hemmet ever was, quickly wins out. You stick to the original perfectly. When your temporary assignment is over and you return to the granary, the world looks different. The endless sacks of barley seem mundane, trivial. You have tasted the work of eternity, and it has changed you. You have performed your sacred duty, ensuring that the words of the gods and the contracts of their temple will endure. You are not just a counter of things anymore. You are a guardian of meaning. The sacred quiet work in the house of life is a temporary honor. You return to the granary, to the familiar dust and the endless columns of numbers. Life resumes its steady, predictable pace. But the world outside the temple walls is not always at peace. Pharaoh is on the move. An ambitious campaign into Nubia to secure the gold mines is being planned, or perhaps a punitive expedition against troublesome Hittite vassals in Syria. The great machinery of the Egyptian army is stirring, and that machine, like the temple, runs on the work of scribes. One day a military courier arrives, his kilt caked with the dust of the road. He carries a sealed papyrus for your master. The army is requisitioning scribes. You, being young, unattached, and competent, are volunteered for service. Suddenly, your ordered world is thrown into chaos. You pack your pallet in a few belongings, and you are attached to the division of Amun, one of the great regiments of the army as it prepares to march south. The contrast is a shock to the system. The quiet reverence of the temple is replaced by the roaring, chaotic energy of 10,000 men preparing for war. The air no longer smells of incense, but of sweat, oiled leather, hot metal, and nervous energy. The soft chants of priests are drowned out by the bellowing of officers, the hammering of armorers, and the incessant rumble of chariot wheels. You have traded your quiet corner in the granary for a place in a river of noise and steel. Your role, you quickly learn, is fundamentally the same, but the stakes are terrifyingly higher. You are still an accountant, but now you work for a general instead of a priest. Your first duty is logistics rations. You are responsible for a contingent of 500 men. Every day you must calculate and authorize the distribution of bread, beer, and dried meat. A mistake in the temple ledgers could lead to a stern talking to. A mistake here, one that leaves a company of soldiers hungry, could lead to a riot, or worse, a swift and brutal punishment from a commander who has no time for excuses. You learn to perform your calculations quickly, sitting on an overturned crate with soldiers jostling you, and the desert wind threatening to blow your papyrus away. You march for weeks. The green, familiar banks of the Nile give way to the harsh, rocky terrain of the desert. Your clean linen kilt is perpetually coated in a layer of fine dust. Your soft, scribal hands become chapped and raw. You are not a soldier, but you suffer the same hardships: the scorching sun, the frigid nights, the monotonous diet, the constant grinding fatigue of the march. You walk beside the supply carts, your pallet, and a small chest of scrolls, your only responsibility. You quickly realize your pallet, a symbol of intellectual power back home, makes for a very poor shield out here. Historians still argue about the precise status of a scribe within the military hierarchy. Were they considered protected non-combatant specialists, or were they expected to pick up a spear and fight if their camp was overrun? You hope with every fiber of your being that it is the former. You see the soldiers practicing, their bodies hard and scarred. You, who have spent your life training your mind, would not last a moment in a real fight. Your only weapon is your intellect. After a skirmish with a rebellious local chieftain, you are given a new and grim task listing the plunder. This is inventory management at its most brutal. You stand in a captured village, the smoke still acrid in the air, and you record everything of value. So many head of cattle, so many goat sacks of unfamiliar grain, crude metal tools, and woven blankets. And then come the captives, you must list them too. So many men, so many women, so many children, all of them now the property of Pharaoh. You look into their terrified faces and see only numbers entries in a ledger. You must force yourself to be detached to be the objective recorder. This, you realize, is a very different kind of accounting, one that weighs not on a scale, but on the soul. Yet there is another side to your work, a profoundly human one. You become the voice of the illiterate soldiers. In the evenings, as the army makes camp, men will approach you, their faces tough and weather-beaten, their hands calloused from holding a spear, not a pen. They come to you hesitantly, respectfully, and ask if you will write a letter home for them. To my wife Merit, one will begin. Tell her I am well. Tell her the gods protect me. Ask if the new calf was born healthy. Another wants to send a message to his mother, another to his brother. You listen to their simple, heartfelt words, the universal concerns of men far from home, and you translate them into the formal, flowing script of a proper letter. You find it amusing that almost every letter, regardless of the sender, contains a surprisingly similar closing section asking their family to send more silver or beer money via the next military courier. You are their only bridge to the lives they left behind. You read them the letters that arrive in return, their faces lighting up at news of a child's first steps or falling at the mention of a failed crop. In these moments, you are not just a bureaucrat. You are a confessor, a confidant, a vital link in the chain of human connection. During the one major battle of the campaign, you are stationed on a hill with the commanding general and his staff. You do not fight. You watch. Below you, the neat lines of the Egyptian army clash with the chaotic horde of the enemy. The air fills with the terrifying sounds of war, the blare of trumpets, the clash of bronze, and the screams of men. Your job is to take down the general's dispatches, to record the events as they unfold for the official campaign record that will be presented to Pharaoh. You see the dust, the flashing spears, the falling bodies, and you write His Majesty's infantry advanced and broke their left flank. You are a witness to horror, but your training forces you to filter it through the detached lens of a reporter. It is a strange out-of-body experience, and one you will never forget. As you tally the enemy dead represented by a grisly pile of severed hands brought before the general, you finally understand the full, awesome, and terrible power of the state you serve. You return from the dusty, chaotic world of the military campaign, your ears still ringing with the phantom sounds of marching feet. Stepping back into the relative silence of the temple granary feels like a dream. The greatest perk of your quiet life, you now realize, is the distinct lack of people trying to kill you. The experience has given you a new appreciation for the stability of your position and for the compensation that comes with it. You might not be getting rich, but you are secure, fed, and safe. And in the ancient world, that is a form of wealth that cannot be overstated. You never see a single coin. The concept of money of little metal discs with a state-guaranteed value has not yet arrived in Egypt. Your entire world runs on a complex system of rations, redistribution, and barter. Your paycheck is something you can eat. Every 10 days, you present yourself at the distribution window of the granary, the very place you record outgoing goods and receive your wages. You are given a tally of standard loaves of bread and several large jars of beer, the staple currency of the Egyptian state. As a skilled scribe, your ration is significantly more generous than that of the manual laborers. You also receive periodic allotments of other necessities, a flask of sesame oil for cooking, and for your lamp a bag of salt, a net of onions and garlic, and once a year a long bolt of fine linen, enough to have a new kilt and tunic made. This is your salary. It is tangible, it is real, and it presents a unique set of logistical challenges. You can't put your wages in a savings account. You have to eat them or find a way to use them before the bread goes stale and the beer turns sour. This reality forces you into the bustling, informal world of the local market. With the surplus from your generous ration, you become a trader. You take 3 loaves of your high-quality bread and 2 jars of strong temple beer, a desirable commodity, and you barter. That nagging feeling of your old sandals wearing thin can be solved not by buying a new pair, but by finding the sandal maker and negotiating a price. These sandals, he might say, are worth 1 deben of copper. The deben is a standardized unit of weight, not a coin, a mainstream historical fact that formed the bedrock of Egyptian commerce. It's a way of valuing things against a common standard. So the sandal maker values his work at 1 deben. You in turn know that a loaf of your bread is valued at 1/8 of a deben and a jar of beer at a quarter. You do the quick math in your head. You offer him 2 loaves and 3 jars of beer. He protests, you haggle, and you eventually settle on a price. You walk away with new footwear, and he walks away with his dinner and drink for the next few days. The most complicated math you do all week often has nothing to do with your job, but with figuring out the going rate for a bag of dates. This system, a world without cash, is the subject of endless scholarly debate. Historians still argue about how efficient this moneyless system truly was. Did it create a stable and equitable society where everyone's basic needs were met with tangible goods, or was it a clumsy and restrictive system that stifled private enterprise and created a thriving black market? From your perspective, it's a bit of both. It feels secure but also limiting. Your greatest asset, however, is not your surplus beer. It is the skill locked away in your mind and the dexterity in your fingers. This is the source of your side hustle. The knowledge of writing is a rare and precious commodity, and there are always people outside the official state and temple structure who need it. One evening, a local artisan, a man who carves beautiful wooden boxes, approaches you discreetly. His brother-in-law is trying to cheat him out of an inheritance. He needs a letter written, a formal, intimidating petition to the local magistrate. He cannot pay you in rations, for he receives none. Instead, he offers you a choice of any box from his workshop. You spend an hour that evening drafting a carefully worded legal threat, and in return you become the owner of a stunning sycamore box inlaid with ebony and ivory, a luxury item you could never afford to barter for with bread alone. You learn a timeless lesson: being a freelance writer has been a viable side career for at least 3,000 years. These outside jobs are your main source of disposable income. A farmer needs a marriage contract drafted. A woman needs a rental agreement for a room in her house. A soldier on leave wants a love poem written for a girl he is trying to woo. You write them all, and you are paid in kind fresh vegetables, a live chicken, a well-made pot, a small knife with a carved handle. It is through this secret after-hours work that you accumulate the small luxuries that elevate your life from mere subsistence to genuine comfort. Your understanding of the economy is grimly enhanced by the occasional public trial you are tasked with recording. The court records of tomb robbers are a quirky and fascinating source of information for this period. When a gang of thieves is caught, they are interrogated, often under torture, and they confess every detail. They list the golden amulets, the silver rings, the linen bolts, and the alabaster jars they stole from the tombs of the dead. More importantly, they describe exactly how they divided the loot and bartered it away for food, wine, and donkeys. As you write down their confessions, you are inadvertently creating a detailed price list of black market goods, a stark reminder of the other darker economy that runs in the shadows of the official one you serve. You are building a comfortable life. You eat well, you are clothed, and through your skills, you are acquiring possessions that mark you as a man of substance. You have learned to navigate the complex currents of a world without money, a world where a loaf of bread can be both dinner and currency, and where your ability to form words on a page is more valuable than a sack of silver ever could be. Your life has found a stable, comfortable rhythm. Your belly is full, your side hustles provide small luxuries, and your work, while tedious, is something you perform with practiced ease. You have achieved the dream your father had for you, a life free from the brutal toil of the fields. But now a new, more complicated ambition begins to stir within you. It is not enough to be a scribe. You want to be an important scribe. You want a promotion, a better title, a finer ration, a bigger house. And to get that, you must learn to navigate the treacherous, slow-moving currents of the bureaucracy. The first thing you learn is that your boss, the overseer, Pentu, is not just your master. He is a man caught in the middle of a vast and unforgiving hierarchy. He is under constant pressure from his own superiors in the regional government, who are in turn under pressure from the vizier's office in Thebes. This pressure flows downhill, and you are standing at the bottom. One day a runner arrives with a message. and Pentu's usual calm demeanor evaporates. A monthly report was due yesterday. He storms into your workspace, demanding to know why the final tallies are not ready. You try to explain that you are waiting on the cattle counts from another department, but he cuts you off. "I do not need excuses," he snaps. "I need numbers. Find them." You spend the rest of the day in a frantic rush, chasing down the information only to discover the scribe in the cattle yard has been sick for 3 days. You compile the report with the missing data noted, and Pentu submits it with a weary sigh. He never apologizes for his outburst. You learn a valuable lesson. Your boss's mood is a direct reflection of the pressure he is under. Part of your job is to become a student of his anxieties, to anticipate his needs, and to make his life easier, because a happy boss is one who might remember your name when a better position opens up. Then there are your colleagues. The old silent scribe, IP, remains a fixture, a man who has perfected the art of bureaucratic survival by becoming as functional and unnoticeable as the bench he sits on. He does his work perfectly, speaks only when spoken to, and has clearly had no ambition for the last 30 years. He is a cautionary tale and a source of cynical wisdom. But there is a new scribe, a young man named Hori, recently assigned to the granary. He is sharp, he is charming, and he is dangerously ambitious. You see the way he laughs at Pentu's weak jokes, how he always manages to be the one to present a finished report, even if you did half the work. Your ambitious colleague's kilt, you note wryly, is always immaculately white perhaps, from all the time he spends polishing his superior's sandals. He is a rival, and you must learn to play his game without sacrificing your own integrity. The true nature of the administration, you discover, is its monumental slowness. The wheels of bureaucracy grind with a slowness that makes the erosion of mountains seem hasty. One afternoon, you run out of the fine papyrus used for the official ledgers. You assume you can simply request more. IP gives you a pitying look. To acquire a new role, you must fill out a requisition form. This form must be written in triplicate on 3 separate ostraca. One copy goes to the overseer of the temple stores, one goes to your own boss Pentu for approval, and one is filed in your own department's records. You submit the form. A week later, you hear nothing. You inquire politely with Pentu, who tells you the storehouse overseer is waiting for the monthly supply report before releasing any new materials. You are stuck in a perfect loop of bureaucratic logic. You cannot complete the report without the papyrus, and you cannot get the papyrus without completing the report. You joke to your housemates that it would be faster to walk to the delta and grow the reeds yourself. To get things done, you learn you need to master the unwritten rules. You learn the power of the model letters, the templates scribes have used for generations. There is a specific formula for a flattering request, a different one for a stern but respectful complaint. You practice these, learning to infuse the standard impersonal language with just the right amount of urgency or deference. You are becoming a master of the passive-aggressive administrative request. More importantly, you learn the value of connections. You make a point of sharing a beer with the scribe from the cattle yard. You play a game of Senate with a man who works in the office of the Treasury. These are not just friendships. They are strategic alliances. When you need a number quickly, your friend in the cattle yard might provide it for you before filing the official report. When a requisition form gets lost, your acquaintance in the Treasury might know which stack of papyri to look for it in. The entire administration runs on this shadow network of personal favors and quiet cooperation. Historians still argue about the primary mechanism for promotion within the system. Was it based on pure merit on the scribe who wrote the neatest hand and made the fewest errors? Or was it, as in so many governments throughout history, more dependent on patronage, on having a powerful official take an interest in you, on family connections, and on navigating the treacherous currents of office politics? You suspect the answer is all of the above. You must be good at your job, but you must also be seen to be good by the right people. You must learn when to speak up to showcase your knowledge and when to stay silent to avoid showing up your superiors. You learn that the 3 most important words in your vocabulary are not life, prosperity, health, but rather yes, overseer, Pentu. This is the real test. It is a game far more complex than Senet with rules that are never explained. Your education at the House of Life taught you how to write. Your first few years of work are teaching you how to survive, and how with a bit of luck and a lot of cunning, you might even begin to climb. Years of careful work of navigating the moods of your superiors and the ambitions of your colleagues finally pay off. You are no longer the most junior scribe in the granary. You have received a promotion. It is a modest step up. You are now a scribe of the treasury of Amun, a title that sounds more impressive than it is. But it comes with a larger ration and, most importantly, the right to a small private house on the edge of the temple complex. You are a man of standing. You have a career. The next logical step, the one your society expects of you, is to establish a household. It is time to find a wife. Love in your world is a concept found more often in poetry than in practice. Marriage is a practical matter, a social contract designed to merge two families, produce heirs, and create a stable, productive household. The process is a negotiation. Your family, along with your patron, Pentu, who sees a stable employee as a reliable one, puts out feelers. A suitable match is found, the daughter of a master craftsman, a man who carves ceremonial furniture for the temple. Her name is Merit, and she is said to be healthy, hardworking, and skilled in managing a home. Her family is respectable, and her father is pleased with the prospect of having a literate son-in-law who can help with his contracts. You meet her once, a brief chaperoned encounter where you exchange a few stilted words. She is quiet with intelligent eyes that seem to assess you with a calm curiosity. The real business happens between your father and hers. They negotiate the settlement. He agrees to provide a bride price, a gift to her family to compensate for the loss of a daughter. Her father in turn provides her with a dowry chest of fine linen, kitchen pottery, a well-made bed frame, and several pieces of silver jewelry. This property will remain hers, a crucial piece of financial security for her within the marriage. The culmination of all this is the marriage contract, a document you draft yourself with a ridiculously unsteady hand. Of all the legal texts you have ever written, this one feels the most intimidating. This mainstream historical fact, the existence of these detailed marriage contracts, shows that this was far more than a simple religious ceremony. It was a binding legal agreement. Your contract outlines your responsibilities to feed, clothe, and cherish her. It outlines her rights and specifies what she is entitled to should you ever divorce. You sign it, your father signs it, and her father signs it. And just like that, you are married. You bring Merit to your new house. It is a simple 3-room mud brick dwelling with a small walled courtyard, but after years in shared quarters, it feels like a palace. Suddenly, the house transforms into a home. Merit's presence softens the bare corners. Her dowry of colorful textiles brightens the walls, and the smell of her cooking recipes, far more interesting than the simple stews of your bachelor days, fills the air. You discover that managing a household budget is in its own way more complex than managing the temple ledgers. Merit, however, is a natural master of this domestic economy, stretching your rations further than you thought possible. She establishes a small garden in the courtyard and begins weaving linen on a loom, her own contribution to the household's prosperity. It is a partnership. You manage the outside world of work and bureaucracy. She manages the internal world of home and hearth. And in this shared space, something unexpected begins to grow. Historians still argue about the emotional reality behind these practical arrangements. Do the surviving love poems, with their passionate declarations of longing and desire, represent a purely literary fantasy, or do they prove that deep romantic love could and did blossom within these unions? As you share your days with Merit, you find the truth is somewhere in the middle. You grow to admire her quiet competence, her sharp wit. You find yourself telling her about your day, about the frustrating slowness of overseer Pentu, or the annoying ambition of your colleague Hori. She listens, and for the first time you have a true confidant. A quiet affection built on respect and shared life takes root. Soon the most important hope of any marriage becomes your central focus, the desire for children. A child, especially a son, is the ultimate mark of a successful household. A son is continuity. He is someone to carry your name, to inherit your position, to whom you can pass down your hard-won knowledge. You find yourself eagerly anticipating the day you can be on the other side of the "you must study harder" conversation. You and Merit place a small faience amulet of the dwarf god Bes over your doorway. This quirky and beloved household deity, with his wild hair and frightening grimace, is a fierce protector of the family, warding off evil spirits, and most importantly, watching over women in childbirth. You also make extra offerings to Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess of fertility. When Merritt announces she is pregnant, the household is filled with a new and joyful anxiety. The birth is successful. It is a healthy baby girl. You feel a surge of pride and love that surprises you with its intensity. You will raise her to be strong and capable, a respected mistress of the house in her own right one day. A year later, another child comes. This time it is a son. The joy you feel is profound. You have done it. You have established your line. You look at the tiny sleeping baby and you see the future. You see a boy who will not have to toil in the fields, a boy who will enter the house of life, not as a terrified outsider, but as the son of a respected scribe. Your family's gamble made so many years ago has secured the future for a new generation. Your home is no longer just a house, it is a dynasty in miniature, a small, thriving testament to your journey from the mud to the scroll. Your life has settled a comfortable rhythm of work and family. Your son is growing, your daughter is learning to manage the household stores alongside your wife. Merit and your position at the temple treasury is secure. You have achieved everything a boy from the fields could have dreamed of. Yet the ambition that drove you from the mud to the scroll has not entirely faded. You are good with numbers, and your reputation for meticulous work has spread beyond the granary walls. This reputation brings an opportunity you never imagined. A great project is beginning. The vizier of Lower Egypt, a man of immense power, has died, and his successor is planning a mortuary temple and tomb complex worthy of his status. The overseer of works, a legendary architect scribe named Amenhotep, son of Hapu, needs a deputy with a masterful grasp of mathematics. You are summoned for an interview. This is a different league of scribe. Amenhotep is old, his face a roadmap of desert sun and intense concentration. He is one of the most respected men in the kingdom, a man who dines with the Pharaoh's own sons. He doesn't ask you to read poetry or copy a letter. He unrolls a complex papyrus, a plan for a series of interlocking chambers, and asks you to calculate the total volume of stone that would need to be quarried. Then he asks you how you would adjust the dimensions to account for a recently discovered fault in the limestone bedrock. The questions are rapid-fire, a test not just of your memorized formulas, but of your ability to think to solve problems in 3 dimensions. You answer as best you can, your mind racing. At the end, he simply nods and dismisses you. A week later, you are informed that you have the post. You are now a scribe of the king's works. Your world changes overnight. You move from the dusty administrative world of accounting to the vibrant, creative, and high-stakes world of monumental construction. Your new office is a large, airy chamber filled with drawing tables and stacked with rolls of the finest papyrus. Your new job finally allows you to be the one telling other people what to do, which is a delightful change of pace. You are no longer just recording what has been done. You are planning what will be. Your first task is to help draft the master plan. Using a large sheet of papyrus marked with a precise grid, you and Amenhotep draw the blueprint for the tomb complex. Every line has meaning. The dimensions are not arbitrary. They are based on sacred ratios and theological principles. The orientation of the main chapel must align perfectly with the rising sun on the winter solstice. The proportions of the columns must adhere to the classical orders that have been passed down for generations. This is not just architecture. It is mathematics as a form of worship. You use your finest hieroglyphs for the labels and your most precise geometry for the angles. It is the most challenging and exhilarating work you have ever done. Once the master plan is approved, your work becomes a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. You must calculate everything. How many 100-ton blocks of granite need to be floated down the Nile from the quarries at Aswan? How many thousands of mud bricks are needed for the construction ramps? How many teams of laborers will be required, and for how many years, and how many loaves of bread and jars of beer will it take to feed them all? A miscalculation in the granary ledger meant an awkward conversation with your boss. A miscalculation here could mean a 100-ton granite architrave is left sitting in a quarry 500 miles away, halting the entire project for a season. You learn that calculating the structural load on a stone beam is significantly more interesting than counting beer jars. You are no longer confined to a desk. You spend half your day on the construction site, a chaotic symphony of noise and effort. You see thousands of men, their bodies lean and powerful, working with a coordinated grace that seems impossible. They use simple bronze chisels, wooden mallets, and levers to cut and move stones the size of houses. Their skill is a form of practical magic that your formulas can't fully capture. You are there as the representative of the plan, the guardian of the design. You use a plumb bob to check that the walls are perfectly vertical, a square level, to ensure the foundations are true. You confer with the stonemason foreman, men who cannot read or write, but who understand the language of stone better than anyone alive. This relationship between the planner and the builder is a source of constant debate for historians. They still argue about the extent to which these master builders relied on written plans and formulas like yours versus a body of traditional unwritten knowledge passed directly from one master to another on the site. Was your papyrus scroll the ultimate authority, or was it the experienced eye of the foreman who could spot a flaw in a block of stone just by the sound it made when tapped? You discover it's a partnership. You provide the precise geometry, they provide the practical genius to make it a reality. You also work with the artists. The plan for the tomb includes vast walls covered in painted reliefs depicting the life of the vizier and his journey into the afterlife. You work with a master draftsman to lay out these scenes. You use the same quirky but effective grid system you used for the blueprints. The artist draws a small, perfect image of the vizier on a gridded ostrakhan. You then supervise a team of plasterers and junior artists as they replicate that grid on a massive scale on the tomb wall, allowing them to scale up the image with perfect proportions. You have risen to the honored rank of an architect scribe. You are wielding the full power of your education, blending precise calculation with divine artistry. You stand on the rising walls of the temple you helped design, looking out over the hive of workers below, and you feel a sense of accomplishment that dwarfs anything you have ever known. You are not just pushing papyrus anymore. You are building for eternity, creating a structure that will stand for thousands of years, a permanent testament to the glory of your gods, your patron, and your own quiet, indispensable skill. Your career is flourishing, whether as a master of logistics in the granary or a designer of eternal homes for the great. You have carved out a life of prestige and comfort. Your family is thriving, but the carefully constructed order of your world is fragile. One day a shadow falls over your household. Your young son, the future of your line, is struck by a fierce fever. He burns with a heat that even the coolest water from the well cannot quench. He refuses food and lies listless on his mat, his breath coming in shallow rasps. Your wife Merritt uses all the folk remedies she knows. She applies cool compresses and recites prayers to Isis. You place the protective amulet of Bes closer to his bed, but the fever does not break. The feeling of powerlessness is absolute. All your knowledge, your ability to calculate the king's taxes or design a temple pylon, is utterly useless in the face of your child's suffering. You are a master of order, yet your own son is slipping into chaos. In desperation, you decide to use the influence you have so carefully cultivated. You will not go to a back alley magician with his charms and curses. You will go to the source of all true knowledge, the only place where medicine is studied as a science, the house of life. You carry your son in your arms back to the familiar hallowed halls of the Pharaohs. This time, you are not a student, a functionary, or a guest architect. You are a petitioner, a terrified father seeking a miracle. You are granted an audience with one of the senior healers, a man named Jehuti, whose title is Chief of Secrets of the Healing Arts. He is a priest, but his eyes are not those of a mystic. They are sharp, observant, and analytical. He ushers you into a quiet, clean chamber lined with wooden chests containing his precious medical scrolls. He wastes no time on lengthy prayers. He begins his work with a calm, methodical examination, a process laid out in the texts he so clearly reveres. You recognize the logic from the famed Edwin Smith papyrus, a text you once glanced at but never studied. It is a work of startling rationality. The healer inspects your son's color, feels the heat of his skin, listens to his breathing. He asks you precise questions. When did the fever begin? What has he eaten? Has he been near the marshes? He murmurs to himself, his mind sorting through possibilities. Then he consults his library. He unrolls a section of the great Eber's papyrus, a vast encyclopedia of afflictions and remedies. You watch mesmerized as he scans the columns of neat hieratic. You see passages you can just make out remedies for stomach ailments, for coughs, for blindness, for maladies of the heart. It is a stunning document, a blend of keen observation and deep-seated belief. One prescription for a headache might involve a poultice of herbs, while the one next to it requires a magic spell to be recited 4 times over a small figurine. Historians still argue about this very point. Did the ancient Egyptians see a clear distinction between magic and medicine, or did they view them as two inseparable parts of a single healing science? To them, an illness could have both a visible physical cause and an invisible malevolent one. A demon could cause a fever just as surely as a spoiled piece of fish could cause a stomachache. Therefore, the treatment had to address both realms. The healer was not just a doctor, he was an exorcist. After a long silence, Jehudi finds the section he is looking for. It is the demon of the summer heat, he declares. He gives you a prognosis, another concept from the rational texts, an ailment I will contend with. The relief that floods through you is so powerful it makes you dizzy. He has not declared it hopeless. He sets about preparing the treatment. He grinds herbs with his pestle, mixing them with honey, which you know has a power to quell infection. He takes a piece of bread that is covered in a soft bluish mold, a quirky remedy you've heard of, and adds it to the poultice. Thousands of years later, scientists would find the world's first antibiotic in that very same mold. He applies the poultice to your son's chest and forehead, but the physical treatment is only half the battle. He then begins an incantation, his voice low and commanding, speaking to the invisible demon he believes is causing the illness. Get back, you enemy, you dead thing! Do not cast your shadow upon him. I have my protection against you, a protection of the goddess Isis. The words sound strange and powerful in the quiet room, a direct assault on the forces of chaos. You take your son home along with a supply of the herbal remedy and a copy of the incantation which you are to recite every evening. You follow the healer's instructions with the same precision you would apply to an architectural drawing. For 2 days there is no change. You feel a creeping despair. But on the third morning you awaken to find your son sitting up asking for a drink of water. The fever has broken, his eyes are clear, the crisis has passed. The experience changes you. The power to build a temple that will last for millennia is a great thing. But the power to save a life, to pull a child back from the brink, feels like the only thing that truly matters. You have witnessed a different kind of magic, one born not of divine ratios in stone, but of ancient knowledge, careful observation, and a direct confrontation with the forces of life and death. You realize that your path lies not in the granary or on the construction site, but here in the house of life, among the healers. You spend the next year petitioning for a transfer, proving your worth, and finally earning a place as a junior student once more, this time in the sacred and secret arts of the Sun. Your life has taken another turn, this one leading you towards the quiet, desperate, and noble struggle against the darkness. The years have flowed past you like the great river itself, sometimes in a slow, steady stream, sometimes in a rushing torrent of change. Now in the winter of your life, the river has slowed to a gentle crawl. You are an old man. Your back, once strong from the discipline of the scribal school, is now permanently bent into a gentle curve. Your eyes, which once could spot a misplaced glyph from across a room, now need the strongest light to read by, and you hold the papyrus scrolls much closer to your face. Your hands, the source of your life's work, are the greatest traders. They are gnarled and stiff, the joints swollen with age. Some mornings it is a genuine effort just to close your fingers around a rush brush. Your own hands feel stiffer than a roll of old brittle papyrus. You have lived a dozen different lives within your one lifetime. You have been the dusty accountant of the granary, the recorder of sacred hymns, the architect of eternal homes, the student of the healing arts, and the chronicler of war. Now you hold a final honored post. You are a master of the archives in the house of life, a keeper of the old words, a respected elder whose only duty is to ensure the knowledge of the past is not lost to the future. Most of your days are spent in quiet contemplation, advising younger scribes and poring over the texts you have come to love as old friends. One afternoon, a young priest brings a man and a boy to your quiet chamber. The man is a stonemason, his hands rough, his face earnest and hopeful. The boy is his son, perhaps 10 years old. He is small for his age, with wide, terrified eyes that dart around the room, taking in the towering stacks of papyrus chests. He clutches a small amulet in his hand. You look at the boy, at his simple loincloth, at the dust between his toes, and the river of time suddenly doubles back on itself. You see yourself. You see the frightened, determined boy from the fields who stood before Neb-Hemmet a lifetime ago. The circle has closed. The father makes his plea. His son is bright. He does not have the hands for stonework, but his mind is quick. He has saved for years to offer a gift to the temple in exchange for his son's training. He asks if you, the renowned master scribe, would consider taking him as your personal apprentice. It is your duty and your honor to accept. You look at the boy. You ask him his name. He whispers it, his voice barely audible. You beckon him forward. Show me your hands. You say the words in echo from your own distant past. He holds them out trembling. They are the soft, ignorant hands of a child. You do not see a farmer to be beaten out of him. You see a scribe waiting to be drawn forth. You decide in that moment that you will not be Neb-Hemmet. The world has changed, and so have you. Historians of the future will argue about the teaching methods of your time, whether the notorious harshness was a timeless tradition or a specific philosophy. They will debate if the proverb, "a boy's ear is on his back," was a literal guide for all teachers. You, having been on the receiving end of that philosophy, decide it is not the only path. The fear of the cane can forge a scribe, yes, but you wonder if patience and understanding might forge a better one. Your first lesson with the boy whose name is Achim takes place the next day. You don't begin with monotonous chanting or threats. You take out a fresh gesso board. You draw the beautiful complex hieroglyph for sesh for scribe, the palette, the water pot, and the rush brush holder. This is what we are. You tell him, your voice softer than you expect. We do not lift stones or fight battles. We hold the memory of our people. We give voice to the king and the gods. It is not a job. It is a sacred trust. And the first rule, you add a twinkle in your eye, is learning where the best, coolest shade in the courtyard is. You begin to teach him the signs, but you do it by telling him the stories behind them. The owl is not just the M sound. It is a creature of the night, a silent hunter who sees what others cannot, just as a scribe must. The wavy line is not just the N sound. It is the spirit of the Nile itself, the source of all life. You try to give him the meaning first so that the memorization will not be a burden, but a joy. When his hand falters in forming a glyph, you do not reach for a cane. You take his hand in your own stiff one and gently guide his brush. You show him the proper curve, the right pressure. You have him copy the same old text, the Kemet with its stuffy formal greetings, the satire of the trades with its arrogant humor. As you dictate the familiar words, you reflect on how they have changed for you. You no longer see the satire as just a piece of propaganda to make you feel superior. You see it as a wry commentary on the hardships of all lives, a recognition that the scribe's comfortable boredom is a true privilege bought by the sweat of others. You try to impart this nuance to Achim, teaching him not just to write the words, but to understand them. One day you teach him about the colophon, the quirky but important personal note that a scribe adds to the end of a major work. When you finish copying a scroll, you explain, you sign your name. You say who your master was. You say where you copied it from. You take pride in your work, and you ask the gods to preserve it. You show him an old papyrus, and at its end, the tiny faded script, "This book is completed," by the scribe Amanak's son of Ipui. You tell him a colophon is a scribe's small claim on eternity. You watch him grow week by week. You see the moment of breakthrough in his eyes when he finally understands that the glyphs are sounds, not just pictures. You see his confidence build as his script becomes cleaner. You are passing on your legacy, pouring the knowledge of your long life into a new eager vessel. You have become the master, the teacher, the beginning of someone else's great journey. And you find to your surprise that this act of giving away your knowledge is the most satisfying work you have ever done. The days with your young apprentice, Achim, become the quiet rhythm of your old age. You pour your life into him, seeing your own journey reflected and refined in his young, eager mind. In teaching him, you revisit every stage of your own life. But as you look at the world through his fresh eyes, you also begin to notice things you had long ignored. The world you are preparing him for is not quite the same one you entered. The edges are fraying. The great, eternal, unchanging kingdom of Egypt, the civilization that always felt as permanent as the stars, is beginning to feel old. The signs are subtle, like the first fine cracks in the plaster of an ancient temple wall. You see more and more foreigners in the town market. There are Libyan mercenaries, tall men with braided hair and tattoos, serving in the Pharaoh's army. There are Nubian archers from the south, their skin darker than the richest Nile silt. Traders from across the Great Green Sea arrive with new kinds of pottery and strange ideas. Speaking a babbling tongue you learn is called Greek. You have to teach Akum how to phonetically spell out these foreign names in the clumsy Egyptian script, and it feels like a dilution, a muddying of your pure and sacred language. You can't help but think that after spending a lifetime mastering a complex and beautiful language, the world is deciding to move on to something else. Even the administration, the bedrock of your life, is changing. The demand for speed is overriding the tradition of beauty. You see other scribes using a faster, more abbreviated form of hieratic scrawl that borders on illegible. It is the beginning of what will one day become a whole new script, demotic, the writing of the people. It is efficient, yes, but you look at its messy, hurried forms, and you mourn the loss of the elegant falcons and perfect vipers of the hieroglyphs you so painstakingly learned to draw. The world is getting faster, and you feel it is leaving beauty behind. In the quiet of the archive, you contemplate your life's work. You think of the mountains of papyrus that have passed through your hands, the daily granary ledgers filled with numbers that were vital for a season, and then meaningless, now sit in a storeroom crumbling to dust. The legal contracts you drafted, the marriage agreements and land sales, have served their purpose and are forgotten by all but the families they once bound. You think of the architectural plans, your calculations for temples that now stand their stone forms, a testament to your precision. The stone at least endures. You unroll a scroll you yourself copied 40 years ago. It is the hymn to the Nile, a beautiful piece of literature praising the river that gives your land life. Your script is still clear, the black ink dark against the pale papyrus. You run your wrinkled finger over the surface, feeling its fragility. A fire, a flood, a careless hand, that's all it would take to turn this work, this piece of your soul, into a handful of dust. You wonder with a profound and heavy ache if anyone will be able to read these words in 1,000 years, or 500, or even 100. Will the gods you praise still be worshipped? Will the temples you designed still stand? Will the very meaning of these beautiful symbols be lost to time, turning your life's work into an incomprehensible puzzle? The only thing you're sure will last, you think with a wry internal smile, are the tax records. Of course they would. Historians in the distant future will argue endlessly about the reasons for this slow fade. Was it the relentless pressure from new aggressive empires, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, with their vast armies and iron weapons? Was it the internal decay, the succession of weaker pharaohs, the growing power of ambitious priests and generals who fractured the unity of the two lands? Or was it something simpler, something beyond anyone's control, like a subtle shift in the climate that made the Nile's inundation less predictable, straining the granaries and weakening the foundations of the state? From your vantage point in the archive, you see signs of it all. You read the diplomatic letters from the north, their tone shifting from respectful to demanding. You hear the whispers of political intrigue in the court. You see the notations in the ledgers of a harvest that was 5% less than expected. It feels like the whole world is slowly, almost imperceptibly, winding down. You look at your apprentice Akum diligently practicing his signs on an ostrakhan. You are teaching him the skills for a world that is ceasing to exist. It fills you with a deep, quiet sadness. The career path you followed, the ladder you so carefully climbed, seems to be dissolving into mist. What will it mean to be a scribe of the treasury when the treasury is being emptied to pay foreign mercenaries? What will it mean to be an architect of temples when there is no money for grand new projects? You are the fading echo of a reed pen. You are a vessel of knowledge from a golden time that is passing into twilight. Your greatest fear is not your own death. You have prepared your tomb. You have lived a full life. Your greatest fear is the death of memory, the silence that will fall when the last person who can read these scrolls is gone. You pull another scroll from a chest, its scent familiar and comforting. You hand it to Akum. Read this to me. You say, your voice a soft rasp. It is the tale of Sinuhe. It is a story about a man who was lost, but who eventually found his way home. And as the boy's young, clear voice fills the silent room, you close your eyes and listen, holding on to the words, a quiet defiance against the encroaching dark. Your life, which once stretched before you like an endless roll of fresh papyrus, comes to its gentle end. Your apprentice Achim is now a full scribe in his own right, his hands sure and his mind sharp. Your children are grown with families of their own. You have lived to see your grandchildren. You are laid to rest in the small but respectable tomb you designed for yourself decades ago, your name and titles carefully carved into the stone. You are provisioned for your journey into the afterlife, and a copy of the hymns you loved is placed beside your sarcophagus. The tomb is sealed, and then there is only silence, a deep, profound silence that lasts for 1,000 years and then 1,000 more. The world you knew vanishes. The language you mastered becomes a mysterious puzzle. The great temples are abandoned, their roofs collapsing, their halls filling with sand. New cities with Greek names rise along the coast. A new empire called Rome turns your beloved homeland into its personal granary. The old gods are forgotten, their names chiseled away by the followers of a new faith. The final fading echo of your reed pen goes quiet. No one on earth can read your words. Your entire world, your struggles, your triumphs, your meticulously kept records, all of it is buried, silent, and lost. Then after 30, 40, 50 generations have lived and died, a new kind of man arrives. He comes from a cold, wet land far to the north. He is not a conqueror who wants your grain or a pilgrim who seeks your gods. He is a scholar armed with a measuring tape and a notebook. He is part of an expedition with a general named Napoleon, and he is fascinated by your dead world. These men begin to dig. They uncover the tops of the great pylons at Karnak, they clear the sand from the feet of the Sphinx, and they find a curious black stone near the sea. A stone inscribed with the same text in 3 different scripts: your sacred hieroglyphs, your people's everyday demotic, and the Greek of the later kings. This stone, the Rosetta Stone, becomes a key. For decades, the greatest minds of this new world struggle with the puzzle. They believe, as you once did as a child, that the glyphs are just symbolic pictures. But one of them, a brilliant young Frenchman named Champollion, has a flash of insight, the same one you had in the courtyard of the House of Life so many years ago. He realizes the glyphs are not just pictures, they are sounds. The owl is an M, the leg is a B. The silence of a millennium is broken. Your language lives again. Fueled by this discovery, the digging intensifies. And one day in the ruins of the town where you once lived, a team of these archaeologists uncovers the remains of the temple complex. They find the granary, the House of Life, and the crumbling mud brick walls of the scribal quarters. In what they identify as an ancient archive, or perhaps your very own tomb, they find a sealed wooden chest. On it is a simple faded inscription: a curse upon any who disturb these records of the scribe. It's not a very dramatic curse, but it gives them a moment's pause. Even now, we still argue about the line between archaeology and tomb raiding. Are we honoring your memory or committing the ultimate invasion of privacy? They open the chest. Inside, protected from the moisture by the dry air, and the tightly sealed lid is a collection of papyrus scrolls. Your scrolls. They are impossibly fragile. With painstaking care, they are taken to a museum, humidified, and slowly, carefully unrolled. And then for the first time in 2,000 years, someone reads your life. They don't find the grand history of kings and queens. They find something far more intimate, far more real. They find your daily ledgers from the granary, and they learn the price of beer in your time. They find the letter you wrote for the soldier on campaign, and they feel the ache of a man missing his family. They find the architectural sketch for a tomb, and they marvel at your grasp of geometry. They find your copy of the Hymn to the Nile, and in a small colophon at the end, they find your name. They piece together your career, your family life, your quiet ambitions. After millennia of silence, one of the first things they learn about you is how much you seem to dislike your colleague Hori. Through the miraculous survival of these fragile documents, your quiet, ordinary, yet extraordinary world is reborn. Every careful stroke of your reed pen, every tedious calculation, every personal note becomes a priceless window into the intricate reality of your life. You spent your days recording the present, and in doing so, you became a voice for the past. Your greatest fear was that your work would be forgotten, that your voice would fade. But it did not. It endured. After all the empires and all the gods had turned to dust, your quiet record of a life well lived found its way to us. and your meticulously kept world has become our bedtime story. And so our journey with the scribe comes to a gentle close. The dust of the granary has settled, the ink on the papyrus is dry, and the worries of a life lived thousands of years ago can finally be put to rest. The echoes of his world, once so vibrant and immediate, now begin to soften, receding into the quiet, dream-filled darkness that awaits you. All of his anxieties about deadlines and harvests, his hopes for his children, his pride in his craft, all of it has found its harbor. His story is told. Now it is time for your own story to pause, to find its own quiet harbor in the deep and restful waters of sleep. Let the final images fade like a desert mirage, leaving only a sense of calm in the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing. There are no more lists to memorize, no more bosses to please, no more futures to worry about. There is only this moment, this quiet, this peace. The work is done.